Chapter 1279. Uncle Zhang took the card from Shui Ying's hand in a fluster and heard Shui Ying's words. Compared to the dead Tai Jin gang, the appearance of Shui Ying, Lin Wei, and the rest was more frightening. Because they had guns in their hands. More importantly, they were more powerful than Tai Jin gang. Most importantly, Tai Jin gang was so powerful. He was actually killed by Yun Jian from their class. He was actually killed by Killing God from the Advanced Special Forces. In the past, they had only heard of Killing God's prestige, but today, everyone present had witnessed Killing God's ability. That was beyond what a person should be capable of. What Shuang said at the end made everyone present even more stunned. 10 million USD. 10 million USD for hush money? Did his family own a bank? How could he give out 10 million USD at once? USD. The surrounding students were all stunned. Qi Xiaoxiao's eyes widened in shock. Shuang was the subordinate of the handsome man just now. Even if it was his subordinate, the hush money would be 10 million US dollars. Her boyfriend Lin Zihang's total assets were at most 1/10 of 10 million USD. Qi Xiaoxiao recalled how she had bragged about bringing Lin Zihang to Yunjian and the rest and felt that she had been stupid back then. Her boyfriend gave 10 million USD as hush money. What about her boyfriend? Qi Xiaoxiao instantly despised Lin Zihang. After Uncle Zhang accepted the 10 million USD, Shui Ying's sharp eyes scanned the scene. Although he was handsome and cheerful, the deep scar on his neck made him look ferocious. Therefore, the people standing around didn't dare to step forward. Shuang smiled ferociously and purposely made the people around him shudder. Then, he fiddled with the gun in his hand and said, "Today, I was planning to kill all of you." Hearing Shui Ying's words and recalling the massacre just now, everyone trembled. "However, on account of young madam, I won't kill you. But remember, if anyone dares to say a word about what happened today." Shuang continued. Before he could finish his sentence, the sound of a gunshot reverberated through the sky. Shuang grabbed a pistol and fired a shot into the sky without even looking. After that, Shuang curled his lips. This is the outcome. According to Enhun's rules, they were supposed to kill all the witnesses. However, if all of Yunjian's classmates were killed, it would definitely cause a commotion in Longmen City. Initially, it would not affect Enhun Group at all whether it caused a commotion or not, but the problem was that Yunjian was still living in Longmen City. Yunjian's family had settled down in Longmen City as well. At this moment, Yunjian had already been dragged to the Lamborghini by CE. "Aren't we going to wait for them?" Yunjian asked softly as CE dragged her to the Lamborghini. After asking, she paused for a moment before continuing, "Wait a moment, I'll go say goodbye to Sini." As Yunjian spoke, she wanted to let go of CE's hand that was holding her. Being around CE made her blush and her heart race. "No need to say goodbye. Shuang will do it for you." CE did not loosen his grip on Yunjian's hand. In the next second, he pulled her into the passenger seat of the Lamborghini and drove Yunjian back to Yunjian's house. Yunjian blinked and caught a glimpse of CE's mesmerizing face from the corner of her eye. A small smile spread across her face. Just as Yunjian smiled at CE, she heard him say, "You're going to the International Underground Tea Party in 3 days." It was not a question, it was an affirmation. Yunjian was stunned. She remembered that she had not told CE that she was going to the tea party. In spite of it, Yunjian nodded. She knew that CE had never attended such places. Shuang had always been the one to attend any of Enhun Group's events. CE had never shown his face. Having known CE for so long, Yunjian could roughly guess that he did not like to attend such events. That was why she did not tell CE back then. She thought that CE would not go. Chapter 1280. Yunjian knew that CE didn't like to attend such grand events, so she didn't ask him to come along. When she heard CE's last sentence, Yunjian felt a warmth in her heart. She was silent for 2 seconds before she said to CE, "I know you don't like to go to such events, so you don't have to deliberately accompany me. She knew that Ce didn't like such events, so Yunjian didn't want Ce to do something he didn't like. She was very clear about her feelings now. She could even say out loud that she liked him. She liked him a lot. It was also because of this that Yunjian didn't want Ce to forcefully accompany her to places he didn't want to go. If Ce didn't mean anything to her, Yunjian wouldn't have said such things. In Yunjian's heart, she actually wanted Ce to attend the event with her. Yunjian's gaze was fixed in front of her. The car was moving forward slowly. The windows were closed, and the interior of the car was cold. After she said this, she didn't hear Ce's voice for a long time. Yunjian paused. She was about to turn to look at Ce. Screech, there was an emergency braking sound. Yunjian's eyes met the car's. In the next moment, the car came to a stop along the road like a flash of lightning. This was done in a single night. In the next moment, Yunjian felt herself being embraced by a firm chest. Yunjian was stunned for 2 seconds as she felt this firm chest embrace her. Ce suddenly reached out from the driver's seat and half-hugged Yunjian. His fresh and pleasant scent wafted into Yunjian's nose. Yunjian subconsciously reached out to hug him back. She only felt a warmth in her heart. This strange and touching heartbeat sounded again. At this moment, Ce's magnetic voice came from above Yunjian's head. No matter how much I dislike the occasion, as long as I'm with you, I like it. He didn't shout these words loudly, nor did he act like a teenage boy and girl who wanted everyone to know about their sweetness. Ce only spoke his truest thoughts in the right place, in the right situation. Just like that, like a normal conversation. However, it was Ce's truest thoughts that made Yunjian's heart thump. You. Yunjian's heart trembled slightly. She could feel her heart beating wildly. What Ce said made her heart flutter, or perhaps she was touched. You was all Yunjian could say before she was rendered speechless. After a few seconds of silence, she asked a rather dumb question. Why are you so nice to me? This question was rather stupid. Perhaps it was because Yunjian didn't know what to say at this moment, so her brain short-circuited and she asked such a question. Yunjian regretted it the moment she finished speaking. Was she stupid or something? How could she ask such a stupid question? However, just as Yunjian asked this question, Ce suddenly reached out and placed his hand on the back of Yunjian's head. With one hand on the back of Yunjian's head, he lowered his head. Yunjian could only feel an overwhelming kiss coming down on her. Her lips were suddenly blocked by an ice-cold pair of handsome lips. His handsome lips didn't linger on Yunjian's lips for too long. It was almost like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water against Yunjian's lips. Then, Yunjian saw Ce's fair and flawless handsome face. Chapter 1281. Ce's words were easily misunderstood and Yunjian's cheeks flushed instantly. Drive. My mom made dumplings. Let's go home for dinner. Yunjian gave the playful Ce a shove. She had tacitly agreed to let Ce accompany her to the tea party. Moreover, there was a hint of womanly vibe in her tone when she said that. It tickled Ce's heart again. The woman he had been longing for was right in front of him, but all he could do was watch and drink without getting to know her better. It was a really suffocating feeling. Whenever Ce recalled how Immerse had interrupted his and Yunjian's moment back in Yulong mainland, Ce would feel suffocated. Yunjian, who sat beside Ce, waved her hand gently in front of Ce's eyes and said with a press of lips, "Let's drive. My mom said this morning that we should go home for dumplings." Qin Yiru called everyone to her house, planning to make a pot of dumplings tonight and have dinner together as a group. Gu Junjian happened to be here today as well. It was only then that Ce reluctantly shifted his gaze away from Yunjian and gripped the steering wheel to start the sports car's engine. Home. As for his Xiao Jian, there was still a long way to go. One day, he would get to know her better. Gu Yunjian's house. Qin Yiru was extremely busy. Without Lan Su's help, Qin Yiru had no helper as well. When Lan Su was still around, Lan Su would often follow Qin Yiru around and let Qin Yiru teach her all sorts of things. For example, making dumplings. There were a lot of dumplings to be made tonight. With Lan Su's help in the past, Qin Yiru was always faster. Today, it was basically Qin Yiru cutting the celery and meat fillings herself before wrapping the dumplings. Si Luo was already at Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's house. Shuang had sent her over. She sat alone in the living room, looking a little scared. The water in the kitchen was boiling and Qin Yiru could not pull her hands away, so she asked Si Luo, who was sitting in the living room, gently, Girl, can you do me a favor? Si Luo looked over when she saw that Qin Yiru was calling her and nodded at Qin Yiru submissively. Can you help me pour the boiling water into the kettle? Qin Yiru smiled at Si Luo, her hands never stopping working. Si Luo ran over to help when she. By the time Yunjian and Ce got home, Shuang and Lin Wei were already back. Mo Sen, who had gone out for a walk, came back as well. Qin Yu, Gu Nianji, Yun Yi, and the rest were all home. Qin Yiru had set up a huge round table for everyone to sit at. Xiao Yunju, Gu Nianji, and Gu Junjian were already seated at the round table. Just as Yunjian and Ce sat down, Qin Yiru brought out bowls of dumplings from the kitchen and placed them in front of their seats. Be careful, it's hot. Eat slowly. Qin Yiru smiled and walked to the kitchen. Qin Yiru had just turned around when Shuang called out to her, Auntie, where's Si Luo? Why don't I see her? Shuang had arranged for Si Luo to stay at Qin Yiru's house in the afternoon, so she naturally had to ask now that she was nowhere to be seen. That good child. She's helping me in the kitchen. It's all thanks to her this afternoon, or else I wouldn't have been able to handle it alone. Si Luo is such a good child. Look, the good child is here. Qin Yiru said happily and even pointed at the girl who was walking over from afar. Si Luo carried a bowl of dumplings and placed it in front of Shuang. She then took 2 steps back. This child's background is quite pitiful. Both her parents are dead. Why don't we let this child follow me from now on? I'm bored at home anyway, so this child can have a home. What do you think? Qin Yiru said what she had thought of earlier. Chapter 1282. The meaning behind that statement was self-explanatory. Qin Yiru understood at once and told Shuang with a sudden realization, Okay, Auntie understands. Qin Yiru snickered as she spoke. Actually, I don't have to trouble you. Si Luo was still a little afraid of Shuang, so she spoke up. As she spoke, Si Luo recalled Shuaying's sudden disapproval when she wanted to stay with Qin Yu. Si Luo turned to Yunjian immediately and asked Yunjian for help, Can I stay at your house? Si Luo did not know that Yunjian was not staying at Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's house. She only knew that Yunjian had the final say here. She was dragged away by Shuang before she could ask for help the last time. She did not want to stay with Shuang anymore because he was too scary, especially that scar on his neck. You can ask him. If he agrees, I don't mind. Yunjian smirked and hinted at Shuang before speaking to Si Luo. Asking Shuang to agree? Wasn't that the same as not asking at all? Si Luo paused. She was a girl, so why could she not stay with Qin Yu? Si Luo could not understand. Don't even think about it. As expected, Shuang dismissed Si Luo's idea decisively. The reunion dinner was very, very enjoyable. Only Si Luo pouted, but she had a great time eating as well. Halfway through the meal, Gu Junjian told Yunjian, Get ready. You'll have to pack up and report to the military school in 2 days. Yunjian looked up when she heard Gu Junjian, but Gu Junjian continued to explain. Freshmen in the military school start at a different time from regular high schools. Freshmen in regular high schools usually report to school a week earlier and go through a week of military training. However, the military school's military training lasts for a month, so you have to report to school in early August. You'll be in the military school for the next month, then you'll start classes like regular high schools in September. Gu Junjian explained to Yunjian in detail. Gu Junjian then turned to CE. AE, since you're enrolled in the military school, you're in your senior year and you don't have to go through military training. That's because the military school is closed. Which means that you can't visit her during the month of military training. These matters had to be handled according to the military school's rules. Even if CE's identity was extraordinary, Gu Junjian meant that CE had to bear with it for a month without seeing Yunjian since he had said it out loud. Okay, CE agreed without hesitation. He had agreed to it directly because he wanted to see Xiao Jian. Who could stop him? Gu Junjian meant that he could not meet Xiao Jian openly. Who could stop him from seeing her secretly? Got it. Yunjian nodded. Yunjian's skills were improving in actual combat, but she knew that she was still not strong enough. She was not as capable as she was in her past life, but she was not far from it. Yunjian would not let go of any chance to improve her skills. Military training was excruciating to others, but to her, it was something she could not ask for more. Dinner was over quickly and Qin Yiru cleared the table quickly. Si Luo helped to clean up the table the entire time. Si Luo was a deft girl. After the meal, everyone went back to their own homes. The tea party was held 3 days later, so Yunjian planned to depart early the next morning. At night, Shuang pulled Si Luo back to his place with a grim expression. Chapter 1283. Before Si Luo could finish her sentence, Shuang interrupted her. Are you afraid of me? As Shuang spoke, he took a step closer to her and spoke in a muffled voice. Shuang felt very anxious now. He really wanted to grab this stupid woman and give her a good scolding, but he couldn't bear to do it. Si Luo saw Shuang take another step closer to her, and she took another step back in fear. Then, her hands hung by the sides of her pants. She shrank her head and glanced at the ground beside her. I'm not. You're not. Shuang repeated. At the same time, he stood in front of Si Luo again. Shuang reached out and pinched Si Luo's chin, forcing her to look at him. At this moment, Shuang was already standing next to Si Luo. Shuang could even smell the mint fragrance coming from her body. Si Luo was about to cry. She was really afraid of Shuang. Especially the long scar on Shuang's neck. What kind of injury could leave such a deep scar on his face? Look at me. If you're not afraid of me, then look at me and tell me that you're not afraid of me. Shuang pinched Si Luo's chin and forced her to look at him. He was a little impatient, but he didn't want to hurt her, so he pretended to be fierce and shouted. Sob sob, I. Si Luo was frightened by the snow eagle's aura. She shuddered, then shrank back. Shuang got angrier the more he looked at her, especially when he smelled the minty scent on Si Luo's body. He then looked at Si Luo's beautiful eyes with long eyelashes. Shuang reached out his free hand. It looked as if he wanted to slap her. Si Luo suddenly remembered that she was beaten up when she was begging. She shrank back in fear and closed her eyes. Tears even came out of her eyes as she screamed. Ah! Don't hit me, please don't hit me. I'll be good, boo-hoo. Shuang was stunned by Si Luo's reaction. After he recovered from his shock, he reached out his free hand and pressed the back of Si Luo's head, pulling her head towards him. In the next second, Shuang kissed Si Luo on the lips. Si Luo thought that Shuang was going to hit her, but he actually kissed her. Si Luo's eyes widened. Si Luo was dumbfounded. Shuang didn't kiss her for too long. After he kissed her, he immediately realized his mistake, so he quickly moved his lips away. Shuang punched the wall next to Si Luo as he recalled what he had just done. The hand slammed down hard, and even the white powder on the wall fell down. Si Luo shrank back in fear and covered her face with her hands. Si Luo only opened her eyes when she didn't hear anything after a while. She then saw Shuang looking at her with his dark eyes. She shrunk her neck, trembling. At this moment, Si Luo could see the scar on Shui Ying's neck up close. Those were terrifying scars intertwined together, revealing a huge scar. Just looking at it from such a close distance was enough to frighten people. Si Luo shrank back again, and her hand couldn't help but caress the terrifying scar on Shui Ying's neck. Si Luo was scared to death. She wanted to hide in fear, but when she saw the terrifying scar on Shui Ying's neck, she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Does it hurt? Si Luo asked. Her face was filled with sadness. Si Luo was a very pure girl. She didn't even know what it meant when Shuang licked her lips a few times. Shuang immediately grabbed Si Luo's wrist when he heard what she said. He curled his lips and smiled at her. Are you worried about me? No, If your family saw you injured like this, they would be very sad. Si Luo frowned as she looked at the scar on Shui Ying's neck. He must have been in a lot of pain when he was injured so deeply. I don't have any family. Shui Ying's expression changed at the mention of family. As he spoke, he didn't stop what he was doing, but his expression became more ferocious. If it weren't for this deep scar, Shui Ying's looks would only be slightly less handsome than Si Yi's. After a pause, Shuang said harshly, if it weren't for my family and name, I wouldn't have this scar and been ridiculed since I was young. Shui Ying's words were harsh, but they touched Si Luo's heart. Tears streamed down Si Luo's face when she heard what Shuang said. Chapter 1284. Si Luo started crying without warning after hearing Shui Ying's words. Shuang panicked when he saw that. He hurriedly wiped Si Luo's tears away. To be honest, it was Shui Ying's first time wiping away a girl's tears. He used to hate girls who cried so easily. However, Si Luo gave him a different feeling. For some reason, Shuang panicked when he saw Si Luo's tears. It was as if something precious to him was crying. Furthermore, the girl's minty scent wafted into his nose. Shuang felt like he was going to be possessed. Shuang couldn't help but reach out to remove Si Luo's hand that was rubbing his eyes. He used his other hand to gently wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Shuang panicked when he saw Si Luo's tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Shui Ying's question made Si Luo cry even harder. Si Luo wanted to hold back her tears, but she couldn't no matter how hard she tried. She sobbed to Shuang. Why are you so pitiful? Don't your family want you anymore? Was your injury caused by them? It must hurt a lot, right? As Si Luo spoke, she reached out her delicate hand and gently placed it on Shui Ying's neck. Although she was afraid of the frightening scar on his neck, she still held back her tears as she asked, "What's wrong with you?" Si Luo wasn't faking it. A truly sad person's eyes couldn't be so pure. It was Shui Ying's first time seeing such a crybaby girl. At first, she was afraid of him and wanted to shrink away. She didn't want to go home with him and wanted to cry. Now that she had heard a bit of her tragic past, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing. Shuang didn't know how to comfort her. He hugged Si Luo in his arms and gently stroked Si Luo's back. It doesn't hurt anymore. Don't cry. Si Luo's heart skipped a beat when Shuang suddenly hugged her. She really stopped crying. However, this feeling was new to her. Si Luo had never gone to school. She was adopted by her foster parents since she was young and was locked up at home to do manual labor. No one taught her, so she didn't even know the difference between boys and girls. But at this moment, Si Luo stopped crying. She raised her hand but didn't know where to put it. She stood rooted to the ground, stunned. No one had ever hugged her like this since she was young. When she was young, everyone would only beat her and scold her. Regardless of whether it was the children or the adults, they all despised her. They said that she often did manual labor, was dirty, and had bacteria all over her body. No one was even willing to approach her. Si Luo was completely stunned. Shuang had never thought that he would actually hug her. But the faint scent of mint wafted from the girl's body, and Shuang couldn't bear to let go. No one knew what was happening here. At this moment, Yun Jian and Ce were sleeping on the same bed, but nothing happened. With the person he loved sleeping beside him, Ce only touched Yun Jian for a while but did not do anything excessive. Yun Jian and Ce went to bed early because they were preparing to leave for the tea party the next day. Yun Jian and Ce woke up early the next morning. Qin Yu was going to go with Yun Jian as well. Gu Nianji was left behind in Longmen City by Qin Yu. As for Lin Wei and Imo Sun, they were sent back to an Hun group by Ce. Shuang went with Ce. Yun Jian had just woken up when Yunyi called her to the garden outside the villa. Yun Jian knew that Yunyi had come because Qin Yu was going on a long trip with her. As expected, Yunyi looked at Yun Jian and asked, "Xiao Jian, where are you guys going?" Yun Jian only said that she was going out but did not say where. Yun Jian's gaze dimmed. She blinked at Yun Yi but did not elaborate. "Go, we'll be back soon." "Xiao Jian," Yun Yi suddenly cut Yun Jian off. He was silent for a while and hesitated. Chapter 1285. Yun Yi thought about it for a long time before he finally decided to ask the question. He had been wanting to ask for a long time about whether Yun Jian was his biological sister. It had been almost a year. It had been almost a year since his little sister had changed until today. What was his sister like in the past? She was timid, weak, and useless. But what about his sister now? Her brilliance was dazzling and her ability was terrifying. Even everything that happened after that. In the beginning, Yun Yi thought that his sister had changed and that she was just hiding her timid and weak personality. However, Yun Jian's actions later made Yun Yi deeply suspicious. However, because Yun Jian's appearance did not change, Yun Yi did not have any suspicions at first. However, until today, they had been together for almost a year. No matter how much a person's personality changed, it was impossible for it to change so drastically. Initially, Yun Yi wanted to wait for Yun Jian to tell him herself. However, he could not wait any longer. Yun Jian was stunned by Yun Yi's sudden question. Looking at Yun Yi's questioning gaze, Yun Jian pursed her lips. She had never hidden herself in front of Yun Yi and Qin Yiru because Yun Jian did not plan to do so from the beginning. As long as Yun Yi and Qin Yiru asked her, she planned to tell Yun Yi the truth. However, looking at Yun Yi's nervous face, Yun Jian felt that she was wrong. Perhaps she did not really see Yun Yi and Qin Yiru as her family in the beginning, so she was not afraid in the beginning. She even thought that if her identity as Yun Jian was not exposed, she could just leave. Slaying God had always been a homeless person who could live anywhere she wanted. She lived a carefree life and was never tied down by the world. However, Yun Jian had never thought that she would be tied down by the word family with Yun Yi and Qin Yiru. Therefore, the more she did not want to say that she was not Yun Jian. However, when the day came, Yun Yi still asked. Yun Jian lowered her eyes. Finally, under Yun Yi's questioning, she looked up and said to Yun Yi openly, "Yes, I'm not your biological sister, Yun Jian." She did not plan to lie again. If Yun Yi found out and hated her, if Yun Yi found out and told Qin Yiru the truth and chased her away, she would leave with Xiao Yunju immediately. She, Yun Jian, was not someone who could not let go. Seeing Yun Jian confess so openly, Yun Yi felt like he was struck by lightning. He was stupefied. Even when he was mentally prepared when he asked the question, he was still stupefied when he actually heard it. "You're not Xiao Jian. Then where did my real sister go? Why are you here? To replace my sister's identity?" Yun Yi asked a series of questions. Yun Yi paused in the end and his voice sounded calm, but if one were to listen closely, one could hear the raspiness and uncontrollable tremor in Yun Yi's voice. There was a pause before Yun Yi asked the last question. "Then, who are you?" Yun Yi's emotions were like a roller coaster right now. His heart was clenched tightly. He had grown up with his little sister, and he had become a completely different person. Those who had never experienced this would not be able to understand this feeling. Chapter 1286. Yun Jian opened her mouth. Every word that came out of her mouth made Yun Yi tremble violently. At this moment, Yun Jian paused for a moment before she continued. Yes, I'm not your biological sister. I'm an underground agent who kills without batting an eyelid. The person standing in front of you is not your biological sister, nor is she some spoiled daughter of a rich family. She's just an underground agent who stepped on countless corpses and barely managed to survive through life and death situations. She's the top wanted criminal of the 3S level Interpol. At the end of her speech, Yun Jian even used an outsider's tone to tell Yun Yi her identity in full detail. No one knew better than herself how much ability and courage it took to survive in an assassin organization like Enhan. She wished so much that she was just an ordinary junior high school student, with a brother who doted on her, just like Yun Yi, and a mother who loved her, just like Qin Yiru. Outsiders respected her, only because they saw her strength. But to be honest, she didn't even have the right to choose whether to live or die back then. She couldn't be like an ordinary junior high school student, who could decide her future through exams like middle school and college entrance exams. She also couldn't be like an ordinary student, who could choose her future career after finishing high school and college. Yun Jian had lived in a world of swords and blood since she was young. She didn't have the right to choose her career. She didn't even have the right to choose whether to live or die. She could only rely on her own two hands. She could only use her own two hands to kill everyone who stood in her way, and then fight for the right to live. This was her life, and also her childhood. Outsiders only saw their glamorous, cool, and terrifying killing skills. But who could have seen how she had survived the massacre? So after she was reborn, she came to an ordinary living environment, an ordinary family, and an ordinary school life. She was greedy. Just like how many people who didn't know her world wanted to explore her world and her living environment, she also wanted to experience the life of an ordinary person. When Yun Jian said that she was an agent of an international underground organization, Yun Yi's heart trembled. He didn't expect that the person in front of him wasn't his sister, but such a terrifying existence in the world. But after listening to Yun Jian's words, Yun Yi could even feel the loneliness in Yun Jian's words. She had no one to rely on and no one to rely on. To Yun Yi, the memories of a year with Yun Jian were more than 10 years' worth of memories with him and his sister. Even after knowing the truth, Yun Yi still felt that Yun Jian was his biological sister. He clenched his fists, but Yun Jian was already speaking to him in a normal tone. When I woke up, I possessed your sister's body. I don't know whether your sister is still alive or not, and I don't know where she went, but I can guarantee with my integrity that I have never harmed you or Mom. Yun Jian's words touched Yun Yi's heart. Yun Yi shook his head abruptly and quickly told Yun Jian, No, Xiao Jian, I'm not afraid that you'll hurt me and Mom. I just want to know the truth. Yun Yi paused before he told Yun Jian seriously, Xiao Jian, whether you're my biological sister or not, I've already treated you as one in my heart. Chapter 1287. Yun Yi's words touched Yun Jian. It was an experience she had never experienced before. Yun Jian nodded heavily, looking at Yun Yi. She did not expect Yun Yi to say something so touching. Yun Jian never shed tears, but there was a glint at the corner of her eyes now. Of course, it was just a flash. No matter how shaken Yun Jian was, she would never shed tears in front of others. Alright, Xiao Jian, aren't you guys going somewhere? You should leave now. Yun Yi was no longer as hesitant as before now that everything was out in the open. Although his younger sister's whereabouts were unknown, there was nothing he could do, so he let it go, but he would never give up. When Yun Jian saw Yun Yi suddenly opening his mouth to smile at her in an attempt to lighten the tense atmosphere, she regained her usual emotions. Go, I'll leave first, Yun Jian turned to tell Yun Yi before she walked out of the parterre. Okay. Yun Yi nodded. Yun Yi then thought of something and stopped Yun Jian. Xiao Jian, I won't object to where you guys are going, but I only have one request. You guys must go there safely and come back in one piece. Yun Yi's words tugged at Yun Jian's heartstrings. Yun Yi was not worried about anything else. He was only concerned about Yun Jian and the others' safety. This touched Yun Jian, so she looked at Yun Yi and nodded. Go, I promise you. No matter what happens in the future, I'll come back alive. Yun Yi did not ask her where she was going or what she was going to do. He never asked about it, but he was essentially the same as Qin Yiru. They only wanted Yun Jian to be safe. When Yun Jian came out of the parterre, Ce was leaning against the Lamborghini sports car with his back against it. He was leaning his legs against the short Lamborghini sports car leisurely. His tall and lean figure was handsome no matter how one looked at it. He watched as Yun Jian walked toward him. Why were you gone for so long? Ce asked softly when Yun Jian came to him, holding Yun Jian's hand as he spoke. I talked to Gu for a while. Yun Jian smiled at Ce with her eyes crinkled. Now that she had both kinship and love, this was the life she had yearned for in her previous life. Ce did not probe further. He patted Yun Jian's head softly with his large hand and pulled Yun Jian into the car. Other than Ce and Yun Jian, Shuang and Qing Yu were also there. Shuang reluctantly left Si Luo at Qin Yiru's house. Before he left, he reminded Si Luo that he would pick him up when he returned. He was afraid that Si Luo would stay at Qin Yiru's house and refuse to leave. Every international underground tea party was very dangerous. Even if the people who rushed to participate were not powerful secret agents or killers, they were still well-known figures in the world. Some minor assassins and secret agents would attend as well. Of course, these people did not have any status. Most of the time, they were directly ignored. When they arrived at the airport, Ce parked the Lamborghini at the management area and the four of them boarded the plane to Country B. Every year, the tea party would be held in a country with the poorest economy in the world. War could break out in that kind of country at any time. Of course, if one had to ask why, it was because in a prosperous country, something unpleasant would always happen at the gathering of assassins and secret agents. When the time came, if someone killed someone, or if someone killed someone with a bomb or a cannon, no one would care in a poor country. This was exactly what they wanted. Chapter 1288. Country B, Kaluki. Just as they got off the plane, Yun Jian and Ce felt the fundamental difference between Country B and Country Z. In short, Country B's economy was more backward. The average income per capita was not high and most of the people were black. Although the income was not high and the country was in dire straits, the people of Country B lived in harmony. Their lives were tough and they might only live in straw huts. Changing their beds every 10 years was something only the wealthiest family in the village could do. In Country B, however, everyone helped each other. Money was paramount, but sometimes, no amount of money could make up for a favor. Just as Yun Jian, Ce, Shuang, and Qing Yu got off the plane, they saw Country B's people working hard on the streets, helping each other to move fruit trees. Some of the women in Country B wore headscarves while others did not. In Country B, women did not have the rule that they had to wrap themselves up completely before they could go out. In some countries, women's social status was so low that young girls had to wrap themselves up completely, only showing their eyes when they could go out. Of course, this did not exist in Country B. Yun Jian, Qing Yu, and the rest were Asian. They were not white, but they were not tanned either. Their skin was just right. Of course, walking among the crowd in Country B, Yun Jian, Qing Yu, and the rest attracted a lot of attention. Even so, no Country B's people would greet them. Sister Jian, Master sent me the address. She's not here yet. She wants us to go over first and stay at the host's guest house, Qing Yu told Yun Jian after receiving Snake Lizard's message. Qing Yu was discovered by Snake Lizard and the Kosha mercenaries, and her poison skills were personally taught by Snake Lizard. Therefore, the master Qing Yu mentioned was Snake Lizard. Okay. Yun Jian nodded. Then, the group went to the guest house they had agreed on. The guest house was provided by the organizer of the underground tea party. Yun Jian, Ce, and the rest arrived 2 days early as the tea party would only begin 2 days later. Therefore, Yun Jian, CE, and the others could stay in the guest house provided by the organizers. After all, in a destitute country like Country B, there was not even a hotel, let alone a place to stay. This guest house was a very high-class temporary apartment built by the organizers. Of course, the organizers also spent some time building this apartment. After all, this apartment was built according to the structure of a 5-star hotel. The interior decoration and soundproofing were definitely top-notch. As soon as they entered the guest house, a receptionist standing at the front desk handed Yun Jian and the others the keys to 4 rooms. The people who attended this gathering were all internationally famous people, so Yun Jian and the other 3 didn't even need to reveal their identities at the front desk to get the keys to the apartment. Of the 4 rooms, only 3 were needed. CE didn't even go to his room. Instead, he shamelessly went to Yun Jian's room. The apartments here also provided hot springs. The service could be considered top-notch. Yun Jian, on the other hand, wanted to take a bath. The hot springs here were separated for men and women. Without Yun Jian by his side, CE had no interest in the hot springs at all. Yun Jian changed into a swimsuit and a conservative bathrobe over it before going to the hot springs for women. Chapter 1289. Yun Jian was also very clear that the people who could come to this public women's hot spring must be insignificant. It was impossible for ordinary big shots to come here to soak in the public hot spring. Of course, Yun Jian was not excluded. But this was also one of the points that Yun Jian was better than other big shots. She never treated herself as a big shot. It could be said that Yun Jian would usually blend into the ordinary crowd first and then find out the details of some people in the crowd. For example, coming to the hot spring was the best place to find out the details. Of course, the most important reason was that Yun Jian tried to find out something that she should not know from others. Back to the topic, Yun Jian had already arrived at the public women's hot spring with her bathrobe. As soon as she walked into the public women's hot spring, she saw the vast hot spring in front of her. The hot spring covered a large area, about the size of 5 or 6 ordinary classrooms in a school. The hot spring was not purely natural, but man-made. Of course, all the investment was provided by the organizers. And all the high-end equipment here was only to entertain the big shots from all over the world. There were already many people soaking in the hot spring, and this place was exclusively for women. Yun Jian's appearance quickly attracted the attention of many women present. After all, Yun Jian's looks were stunning even if she did not wear any makeup. Of course, the women in the hot spring came from all over the world and various countries. Some countries had different aesthetic standards, so Yun Jian was only the center of attention for a while, and the women quickly looked away. Yun Jian took off her bathrobe and revealed her swimsuit. Her sexy and curvy figure was vividly displayed. After Yun Jian took off her bathrobe, she put it away and went into the hot spring. There were at least a dozen hot springs here, and Yun Jian only picked one that was more pleasing to the eye. As soon as she went into the water, 5 or 6 women immediately surrounded Yun Jian. Yun Jian lowered her eyes and pretended not to see. One of the women stood in front of Yun Jian. She pointed at Yun Jian with a murderous look on her face. Then she said to Yun Jian in English, "This hot spring belongs to Sister Sheena. I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of this hot spring, or you'll die here." Saying so, the 5 to 6 women formed eagle claws with their hands, each of them unleashed their killer moves at Yun Jian. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She still didn't move. His initial judgment was that these women were all low-level assassins or secret agents. This was not Country Z, and the women in front of her were not trying to intimidate her. Killing people was a very common thing for everyone here. Therefore, after these 5 or 6 women surrounded Yun Jian, all the women who were soaking in the hot spring looked at Yun Jian as if they were looking at a dead person. They seemed to be waiting to see Yun Jian being torn to pieces by these 5 or 6 women. Hey, Maggie, this is my friend. Save me some face and don't kill her. She's a little immature. I apologize. Yun Jian was still soaking in the hot spring. The 5 or 6 women surrounded Yunjian and were already planning to attack Yunjian, who was not moving. The people here were very realistic. What should they do to disobedient people? Then they would use death as a warning. At this moment, a woman in her 20s ran over from not far away. She walked over and grabbed Yunjian. She apologized to the leader of the 5 or 6 women and dragged Yunjian to another hot spring. Yunjian did not refuse. She did not intend to expose her identity. Until the woman in her 20s, who looked quite sweet, pulled Yunjian to another hot spring, the woman breathed a sigh of relief. Then she smiled at Yunjian and said, "My name is Doya, and my Chinese name is Gusiki. I see that you're also from country Z, right? You don't know, but the identities of those people just now are shocking. They even know the middle-level personnel of the Kosha mercenaries. You can't afford to offend them. Phew, luckily, I pulled you back in time. Otherwise, you're really done for. You'll definitely be killed by them." Doya breathed a sigh of relief. Then she introduced herself to Yunjian and explained the situation just now. Chapter 1290. Doya turned her gaze to Yunjian after that. Just as Doya was about to say something, Yunjian thanked Doya. "Thank you." Doya grinned at Yunjian's gratitude before waving a hand at her. "Heh, it's no big deal. We're all from country Z after all." Doya then moved closer to Yunjian and pointed at a few women in a hot spring. She then said to Yunjian, "Let's sneak over there. Let's sneak over there. Those are my friends. Shoo, lower your voice. Don't let Maggie and the others see us." Maggie was the leader of the group that surrounded Yunjian with 5 or 6 women. It seemed that Doya was quite afraid of Maggie and the others. Yunjian knew that Doya had pulled her to another hot spring just now to avoid Magi and the rest's line of sight. Doya noticed that Maggie and the others were no longer looking at her and Yunjian. She then decided to bring Yunjian back to her friends. "Okay." Yunjian naturally didn't refuse. "Then let's go." Doya pulled Yunjian's hand and ran to the hot spring where her friends were like a big sister avoiding the attention of Maggie and the others. Yunjian followed Doya's footsteps the entire time. At this critical moment, if Yunjian or Doya made any noise, Maggie and the others would come looking for trouble again. This was the bloody world that Yunjian lived in her previous life. People with power and authority would rush up and kill whoever they didn't like or tease them before humiliating them to death. Therefore, even if Doya had saved Yunjian from Maggie just now, there was no telling if Maggie and the other women would make a comeback. Doya heaved a sigh of relief when she brought Yunjian to the hot spring where she and her friends were. "Doya, you really saved this girl?" One of Doya's friends said lazily as Doya pulled Yunjian into the hot spring. Yunjian immediately looked up and saw a woman whose breasts were so big that even her swimsuit couldn't cover them. She was looking at her with her arms crossed. "You can't even take care of yourself and you still want to save others. Doya, do you know how dangerous it was just now? Maggie and the others aren't simple people. Especially Hina. Hina's old flame is from the Enhun organization. Most importantly, they know people from the Kosha mercenaries. Also, I heard that even the boss of the Western Underground black market owes Hina a favor." A woman in a bikini started scolding Doya after the woman with the big breasts finished speaking. They were a group of low-level assassins who couldn't afford to offend anyone, because it would bring about a fatal disaster. Among all the people present, Hina, who was the sister Hina that Maggie mentioned, was the one with the highest status. Therefore, every woman in the hot spring was in awe of Hina. Before Yunjian came, Hina killed a woman like Yunjian who everyone thought was self-righteous. Doya's friends thought that saving Yunjian from Hina's follower Maggie was a very risky thing to do. Doya waved her hand and smiled before her friend finished speaking. "It's fine. Maggie owes me a favor. I was very safe just now." With that, Doya lowered her voice and told the group with a pat on Yunjian's shoulder. "Besides, I don't want to see such a pretty girl get killed by those people." Chapter 1291. Yunjian didn't say anything. She quietly listened to the people in front of her talking about how Doya saved her. After listening to their conversation, Yunjian could already conclude that Doya was the kindest among them. However, her kind personality wasn't suitable for this path. If Doya continued to maintain her kind heart, Yunjian was sure that she would lose her life one day because of her kindness. Doya, we don't want to see any killing or death. However, your actions not only put you in danger, but if Hina intervened, we would all die here. It's true that you saved this little girl, but you should think about it carefully. We're assassins, not charity workers. The big-breasted woman whose breasts couldn't even be covered by her swimsuit spoke to Doya very seriously. She wasn't targeting Yunjian. Instead, she wanted Doya to see the truth. They weren't strong enough to save anyone now. If Maggie didn't owe Doya a favor just now, not to mention Doya, even Doya's friends would have to die here because of Doya's meddling. Doya was stunned. She couldn't speak for a long time. Finally, Doya was silent for a while. She was about to say, "I promise, this is the last time." Well said. A clear female voice interrupted Doya's words and reached the ears of Doya and her friends. When Doya and Doya's friends turned to look at the source of the voice, they saw Yunjian leaning leisurely on the shore of the hot spring. She closed her eyes and said those 3 words faintly. Everyone present was stupefied for a moment. Did they hear wrongly? This little girl actually said that she was well said? She said that the big-breasted woman's words were well said? Everyone present was criticizing Doya for saving Yunjian. In the end, the little girl actually agreed with the big-breasted woman's words? Everyone was dumbfounded. If it were anyone else, they would probably be furious after hearing what the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini said. After all, the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini wanted Doya to not save Yunjian and let Yunjian be killed by Maggie's group. In the eyes of the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini, if Doya didn't save Yunjian just now, Yunjian would definitely die. Due to Yunjian's age and her seemingly ignorant face, everyone felt that she must be a newbie from some assassin or secret agent organization. However, what Yunjian said surprised everyone. She actually spoke up for the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini? Is she stupid? Just as everyone was thinking that, they heard Yunjian's voice again. Yunjian's words were directed at Doya. From my point of view, I should be thanking you. However, from the assassin's point of view, your kind actions just now will bring you a fatal disaster sooner or later. She's very right. You're assassins, not charity workers. Yunjian's simple words made everyone present gulp. No one expected this teenage girl in front of them to have such a deep understanding. Yunjian didn't give off the feeling of a newbie assassin or secret agent who had just debuted. Instead, it felt like Doya and Doya's friends felt their hearts tighten at this moment. Everyone instantly had an unknown illusion. Chapter 1292. However, everyone quickly dismissed this idea. After all, Yunjian was still young. She couldn't have started training when she was still in her mother's womb, right? So when they thought of this, they didn't think that Yunjian was some big shot on the international stage. When the big-breasted woman heard Yunjian's words, she suddenly liked Yunjian's character very much. Previously, Yunjian didn't say anything and Doya's friends obviously didn't know Yunjian, so they treated Yunjian like a stranger. However, just now, Yunjian's words shocked everyone. Doya was also silent for a few seconds. Yunjian leaned against the shore of the hot spring. She looked at the reactions of the women around her and didn't continue speaking for a while. Until this delicate atmosphere was interrupted when a slender and beautiful hand reached out to Yunjian. The big-breasted woman reached out to Yunjian under everyone's gaze. She narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at Yunjian. That pair of beautiful hands had already reached out to Yunjian. She said, "I said something unpleasant just now. Now, I apologize. I hope you don't mind. Also, my name is Maina. I'm from country M." This big-breasted woman, Maina, intended to bury the hatchet with Yunjian. From the beginning, she was hostile to Yunjian, but now, she wanted to be on good terms with Yunjian. Little girl, your words are quite pleasing to the ears, heh? I was wrong just now. I shouldn't have said that. Let's be friends. My name is Charlotte. I'm from country Y. The woman wearing a very thin bikini also followed the example of the big-breasted woman and apologized to Yunjian. At the same time, Charlotte also reached out a hand to Yunjian. When Yunjian saw this, she only smiled slightly. Then, she shook hands with Maina and Charlotte respectively and nodded to them under the gaze of Maina and Charlotte. Hello, my name is Yunjian. I'm from country Z. Then, Doya's other friends also introduced themselves to Yunjian. They were already familiar with each other. Then we're friends, haha. Charlotte smiled at Yunjian. Maina stood in the middle of the hot spring. She took 2 steps, and her huge breasts trembled. If there was a man here, he would definitely have a nosebleed from the sight of Maina's huge breasts. Since Charlotte said so, Yunjian didn't hold back. Yunjian obtained a lot of information from Doya, Maina, and Charlotte. For example, some big and small figures would appear at the tea party 2 days later. When they were about to come out of the shower, Charlotte suddenly grabbed Yunjian's hand and said to her, Yunjian, I'm going to take a shower. By the way, Yunjian, you have to be careful. Don't mess with Hina and Maggie, the group of people you just messed with. You can't underestimate their status. You have to be careful. Charlotte thought that Yunjian was just a small assassin or secret agent who had just debuted. Charlotte sincerely treated Yunjian as a friend, which was why she held Yunjian's hand and reminded her repeatedly. Charlotte was doing it out of kindness. Yunjian naturally accepted her kindness. Okay, I know. Are you done soaking? We can go back to our rooms now, Charlotte said. Thus, Yunjian and the others put on their bathrobes and planned to go out of the hot spring. Just as they reached the entrance of the hot spring, more than 10 women rushed in from outside. These women took a deep look at Yunjian, and the leader turned her gaze to Maina. Catch her. The leader fiercely ordered the people beside her. Maina didn't even know what was going on, and she was caught by the leader's people. Yunjian narrowed her eyes, but she didn't make a move. Slap. The woman in the lead suddenly gave Maina a slap. Nah. Doya was shocked. She wanted to rush to Maina, but she was stopped by Charlotte. Chapter 1293. It was obvious that Maina did not know the woman who had suddenly asked her men to grab her and slap her. Heh, who am I? I'm the daughter of a European arms family, Mira. The woman who called herself Mira asked her men to grab Maina and gave her a hard slap. She was the daughter of a European arms family. This woman who called herself Mira had a higher status than Hina and was even more difficult to deal with. Doya, Charlotte, and the rest were horrified. Maina was so scared that her whole body trembled. Maina was so scared that she trembled violently. At the same time, the huge cleavage in front of her chest bounced up and down twice. Mira was even angrier when she saw that. Mira lifted her leg and kicked Maina's huge chest hard. She then walked over and pulled Maina's hair. How dare you ask me who I am? My man's soul was hooked when he saw you this morning. I'm here to teach you a lesson today. If I see you again, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Mira said as she turned around to look at Yunjian, Doya, and the rest like a rich lady. To be honest, Yunjian could attack, but she would expose her identity if she did. Exposing her identity before the tea party would definitely put her in danger. If the identity of Slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, was exposed, it would definitely make the world tremble in fear. There were many people in the world who were afraid of Yunjian. However, there were even more people who wanted Yunjian dead. Therefore, if she exposed her identity now, she would be on the verge of death. After all, she would be staying here for a few days. If she exposed her identity now, she would definitely not be able to stay here anymore. Because at that time, wouldn't there be a lot of people who wanted her dead? She would not even be able to join the tea party this time. Therefore, Yun Jian did not attack. She could not be blamed for being selfish. She would not expose herself to death for a friend whom she had only met once. When Mira looked at her, Yun Jian's eyelid twitched slightly. The women in the spa watched the scene as if they were watching a show. None of them came to help. Myra's slap on Maina's face was so heavy that it made Maina's mouth bleed. Based on what Mira said, Maina was not wrong at all. That was because Myra's man was attracted by Maina's breasts, but Maina didn't do anything. Even so, Mira could openly beat up Maina, or even kill her. This was the dark world of Yun Jian's previous life. If you're weak, don't even talk about reason, you don't even have the right to say no. She's your friend? At this moment, Mira suddenly pinched Maina's chin and turned her head towards Yun Jian. When Mira saw Yun Jian's beautiful appearance, her jealousy as a woman soared to the extreme. No. No, hee, she's not my friend. Look at how trashy she is. One look and you can tell that she is the weakest person in the circle. How could she be my friend? Maina was stunned. Then, she looked coldly at Yun Jian and laughed. Behind her back, Maina was hinting at Charlotte with her eyes, asking the latter to take Yun Jian and leave quickly. Maina said those words because she did not want to implicate Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes twitched. She did not expect Maina to say those words to Mira to protect her. If Maina admitted that she was her friend, Mira would definitely shift her attention to her. That way, Maina would not have to suffer. But Maina did not. Hee, is that so? Mira said as she lifted her leg and kicked Maina to the ground. Chapter 1294. Yun Jian did not clench her fists nor did she show any signs of worry for Maina. It was because of this that Mira believed that Maina did not know Yun Jian. Otherwise, Mira would have found a random reason to drag Yun Jian into this. Charlotte, on the other hand, clenched her fists in the dark. She watched her best friend Maina being beaten up by Myra's men but she could not do anything. They had agreed earlier that if any of them were to get into trouble, they would not step in if they could reduce the damage. Charlotte, Doya, and the rest felt as if their hearts were being pierced by a knife but they held it in and did not do anything. It would be useless even if Charlotte and Doya did anything. They would only add to the number of injured. Mira, who was standing in front of him, was the daughter of a European military family. Her status was even higher than Hina's. They could not afford to offend her. They were just a group of low-level assassins. They could only accept their fate if they were to encounter someone like Mira who had the same status as them. Yun Jian was shocked but she did not do anything. She did not expect Maina to go to this extent for her. However, if Yun Jian was someone who changed her mind because she was touched, she would not be standing here alive right now. There were countless people who wanted to assassinate her and make her reveal her weakness because she was touched. In spite of it, Yun Jian had never been fooled. The first condition for her to be ranked as the top international secret agent, slaying God, was that she could not be touched by anyone and forget her original intention. Why? Aren't you guys leaving? Hee, could it be that you are her friends? Is that why you can't bear to leave? Mira noticed that Yun Jian and the rest were not leaving. She suddenly laughed out loud and asked sensitively. If that's the case, then this woman lied to me, right? Myra's smiling face fell instantly. Mira suddenly turned around and stepped on Maina's chest. She then stomped her foot on Maina's huge breasts a few times. Doya almost could not stand it. She wanted to rush forward to save Maina. However, Yun Jian caught her. If Doya ran over now, it would only add to Mina's punishment. It's just that we haven't seen such an exciting show in a long time, so we couldn't help but take a few more glances, Yun Jian said to Mira as if she was an outsider. Mira instantly lost her interest. She glared fiercely at Yun Jian, then turned around and ordered her subordinates to leave. Maina was lying on the ground moaning in pain. No one cared about her. After Mira left, Yunjian was the first to walk up. Doya, Charlotte, and the others quickly helped Maina up. Doya, Charlotte, and the others felt as if their hearts were being stabbed by a knife when they saw Maina's injuries. They would only be bullied if they were not strong enough. Fortunately, they were still alive, so they wanted to become strong. "I'm sorry," Yunjian told Maina softly as she watched Doya and Charlotte slowly help her up from the ground while squatting on the ground. She was very sorry. She could have stopped it, but she did not. Cough cough. Maina coughed a few times. Then, she forced a pale smile and said to Yunjian, "You little brat, why are you apologizing? This has nothing to do with you. She's just jealous of my breasts, haha." Maina even joked as she shook her huge breasts that were about to jump out of her clothes. Yunjian lowered her eyes and did not say anything. Then, they helped Maina back to her bedroom. Yunjian applied medicine for Maina and then returned to her room. As soon as she entered the room, she saw Ce sitting on the sofa. He was wearing a bathrobe. It seemed like he had just taken a shower in the bathroom. The water on his hair flowed down his neck and into the bathrobe on his firm chest. His fair and handsome face was even more handsome. Chapter 1295. Ce had been sitting on the sofa just now, looking aloof like a handsome man who had walked out of a comic book. His handsome face, coupled with his cold and arrogant face, if women were to see him at this moment, regardless of whether they were old or young, they would probably want to pounce on him fiercely. Yunjian was not an ordinary woman. She sucked in a breath but did not lunge at him like a madwoman. Even if Ce was already Yunjian's favorite in her heart, it was the fondness she had for her beloved. On the other hand, Ce, who had maintained his aloof demeanor just now, stood up and walked over when he saw Yunjian. His aloof demeanor vanished in an instant as he grabbed Yunjian's hand and whispered to her, "Xiao Jian." Her voice was so soft that it was as if she was his master. Ce called out and pulled Yunjian into his arms. Just as he did so, however, Ce's hand accidentally touched the belt of Yunjian's bathrobe. The bathrobe Yunjian was wearing was only held together by the thin strap. This time, Ce had really tugged her belt off by accident. Once the belt was pulled off, Yunjian's bathrobe slid to the floor. Yunjian was wearing a swimsuit underneath that showcased her proud figure. Ce felt like a part of him was swelling violently when he saw what was happening. Xiao Jian. Ce, who was usually calm, was panicking. It was fine if he was not panicking, but once he did, Ce's hand was originally going to rest on Yunjian's slender waist, but it slipped and accidentally landed on Yunjian's butt. The swimsuit that Yunjian was wearing happened to wrap around her buttocks, making it rather sensitive. Yunjian blushed and slapped Ce's hand away, taking 2 steps toward the bed. Halfway there, she turned her head, her blushing cheeks pink as she told Ce coquettishly, "Don't follow me or don't get on my bed." Yunjian only wanted to express that she did not want Ce to come to her room and sleep on the same bed as her. In spite of it, Ce's lips curled up even more when he heard Yunjian's words. The night passed uneventfully. Ce merely hugged Yunjian to sleep, sometimes touching her but never doing the last step. After staying in the guest house for 2 days, the 3rd day of the 3rd underground tea party was held in the morning. August 1, 1999. Yunjian, Ce, Shuang, and Qingyu all woke up early in the morning. The guest house was already filled with people and the tea party was being held in a large ballroom not far from the guest house. Although it was called a ballroom, it was actually a high-class venue that was built at the last minute. The environment was naturally not bad, comparable to the most luxurious villas in Country Z. The tea party would be held from morning until 12:00 at night, so the tea party was in progress now. Yunjian and Ce went to the ballroom where the tea party was being held. Today, she did not have to hide her identity anymore, because she was leaving after the party today. Just as Yunjian and Ce arrived at the entrance of the ballroom, they heard a blood-curdling scream and saw a large group of people crowding around to watch the show before they even stepped through the entrance. Yun Jian could vaguely make out the word "na" in the shrill scream. Her eyelids twitched as she suddenly had a bad feeling. Yun Jian quickly pushed through the crowd and saw Mira standing smugly in the middle of the crowd. There was a pool of blood in front of her, and a woman who was no longer breathing lay in the pool of blood. The woman's voluptuous breasts had been cut off and lay naked in front of Mira. Chapter 1296. In the beginning, Doya and Charlotte could still pretend that they didn't know Maina like they did 2 days ago. But now, it wasn't as simple as a normal lesson. Maina was killed by Mira. Maina was dead. The reason was because Mira was holding the hand of the man standing beside her and accidentally bumped into them. That man took a few more glances at Maina's breasts like before. Because of this, Mira ordered someone to humiliate Maina and cut off her breasts in public. Maina died on the spot. This was the result of a person without power and influence going up against a person with power and influence. The surrounding people looked at Maina's disfigured breasts with relish. No one sympathized with Maina. They even thought that she deserved it. Because Maina was a weakling. She deserved to die because she was weak. Ah! Ah! You evil woman! You'll die a horrible death. Nah! Nah! Ah! Apart from the others' indifference, Doya and Charlotte had the deepest feelings for Maina. At this moment, Doya and Charlotte had already roared madly and wanted to rush towards Mira, but they were firmly held back by their other friends. Mira was the strongest here, so if Doya and Charlotte were to charge at Mira without reason, they would be sacrificed for no reason. In this bloody world, if you didn't have power or influence, you could as long as you were strong enough to kill the enemy's army. But if you couldn't and didn't have power or influence, there were many people who would end up as miserable as Maina, or even more miserable than Maina. Yo, do you guys want to be played to death by me like this woman? Mira looked at Maina's breasts that she ordered someone to cut off. She glanced at Doya and Charlotte and said in a sarcastic tone. Mira didn't know what she had done wrong. She raised her leg and stepped on Maina's chest that had been cut off. Puff 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 puff. The breasts were trampled into paste by Mira in front of everyone. It also took away the last shameful moment in Maina's life. Blood splattered everywhere. Doya, Charlotte, and the others cried even louder. However, the surrounding people who were watching the show were laughing as if they had seen a perfect show. Some of the men even laughed lecherously and sighed, "Sigh, such a beautiful woman, how nice would it be if we could take turns to f*ck her to death. What a pity for her big breasts, tsk." As he spoke, the evil man gestured with his hand. In this lawless world, Maina was humiliated even after her death. But no one could help her. Yun Jian had just made her way through the crowd when she saw Mira and Charlotte being hugged tightly by a few friends who were equally sobbing but rational. They were wailing in agony, but they could not avenge Maina. When she clearly saw the scene just now, although her expression did not change in the slightest, her heart was fiercely touched. Yun Jian pushed her way through the crowd and came to Doya and Charlotte. Looking at them, she asked faintly without saying anything, "Tell me what happened just now." The more Yun Jian stayed silent, the more her heart did the opposite. She still remembered that when she was kidnapped by the organization in her previous life, she had a good friend. She couldn't remember the name of the little girl. She only remembered that every night when she was kidnapped, the little girl would hug her and comfort her not to be afraid. The little girl once said, "I'm here, don't be afraid. We'll be fine. We'll definitely be able to go home." In that world, the word home was harder than ascending to the heavens. Yun Jian was not born a murderous maniac. She had been cowardly and scared before. Later on, the little girl died. Her limbs were cut off by the other girls in the organization and her heart was dug out. Chapter 1297. The little girl had died for Yun Jian. Originally, the person who had died was Yun Jian. Just like Maina, Yun Jian did not provoke anyone. However, when she was in the organization, she attracted jealousy because of her extreme talent. At that time, Yunjian was 7.5 years old. She was extremely talented, but everyone was jealous of her. Hence, the group of girls organized many other girls to frame Yunjian. They placed the item on Yunjian's bed and insisted that Yunjian had stolen it. They wanted to kill Yunjian. Yunjian's talent was extraordinary, but she could not withstand the attacks of so many girls. In order to save Yunjian, the little girl had all her limbs chopped off by the group of people. Her heart was dug out on the spot. The group of girls were children after all. When they caught the little girl and saw Yunjian's pained expression, they forgot that their initial goal was to kill Yunjian. They even thought that it would be more interesting to keep Yunjian alive and slowly torture her. Hence, they killed the little girl in front of Yunjian that day. Yunjian had lived 2 lives. She would never forget the last words the little girl shouted at her before she was killed: "You must live. You must live. I beg you, you must take me home." The little girl was older than Yunjian. She was already 9 years old at that time. Her life had come to an end before it even began. Yunjian and the little girl were very small at that time. Their only wish was to find their way home. It was also from then on that Yunjian began to change completely. She no longer needed friends. She was no longer weak and useless. She understood that she had to fight for everything herself. In the following year, Yunjian began to train crazily. She killed all kinds of children around her to force herself to live. In almost a short year, the children who were abducted into the assassin organization with her when they were 5 years old all lost their lives to her flying daggers. Children kept coming in from the organization. However, those who came in were living people. When they came out, they were cold corpses. It was already very fortunate that there were corpses left. 8 or 9 out of 10 people couldn't even find their bodies. After that, she debuted at the age of 12 and officially took over assassination missions as an agent. Everything that happened after that has already been mentioned. She began to turn into an out-and-out homicidal maniac, an emotionless killing machine. When his soul returned to reality, he saw Maina lying in a pool of blood and Myra's face. Yunjian's heart surged with an unknown anger. As she recalled Maina, Yunjian felt as if she had seen a little girl protecting her. Sensing Yunjian's murderous intent and sadness, Ce held her hand. Doya and Charlotte, who stood rooted to the ground, were already so mad that they couldn't speak. In the end, it was Charlotte who tried her best to calm her breathing towards Yunjian. However, she panted heavily as she spoke to Yunjian. She killed Na. Her man wanted to see Na's. She said that Na seduced him. So just now, she had people cut off Maina's breasts in front of everyone and humiliated her to death. But for some reason, Charlotte couldn't bring herself to say the rest of her words. Isn't she just a slut? So what if she killed her? Mira stood in the distance and said coldly. Then, Mira turned her gaze towards Yunjian. She was provoked by Yunjian's perfect face and skin, and her jealousy rose again. Mira looked at Yunjian. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Yunjian suddenly let go of Ce's hand and walk over. Myra's heart skipped a beat. Then, "You can go die." Yunjian walked over very slowly and said this sentence faintly. Chapter 1298. From Yunjian's expression, she looked very calm. However, those who knew her knew that she was about to get angry. "Hee, you want me to die?" Mira suddenly sneered. Because of Myra's high status, the surrounding people immediately shouted in shock. "Who's that little girl? She actually dared to challenge Miss Mira, the daughter of Europe's military family. I think this little girl will die a horrible death. TSK, just like that woman who overestimated herself, her breasts will be cut open while she's still alive. Why don't we go and negotiate with Miss Mira and ask her to let us have some fun before she kills this little girl?" All the men standing around were saying disgusting obscenities. Before Maina's death, not only did the people around her not help her, but one of them even kicked Myena back to Mira when she desperately tried to escape. The crowd couldn't wait to watch a free and exciting show. This group of shameless people were still saying shameless things. However, just as they were saying this, the man who suggested to negotiate with Mira and sell Yunjian out for everyone to have some fun before Mira killed Yunjian suddenly had his head pressed down by a slender hand. After that hand pressed down on the man who was fantasizing about Yunjian, the other hand fiercely slapped the man's head, directly fixing his head and twisting his neck. Gotcha. The man died on the spot. The whole process didn't even take 3 seconds. And this person was killed by the owner of this pair of slender hands. The person who killed him was undoubtedly Ce. Ce's face darkened as he directly killed the man. The surrounding people were so frightened that they took 3 steps back. They weren't afraid of Ce killing people, but of Ce's superb skills. One more word and you'll go to hell. Ce coldly spat out this sentence. Among this group of people, Ce was one of the tallest. However, among this group of people, Ce was without a doubt the most handsome one. Because they had never seen Ce in this kind of underground gathering, the surrounding people thought that Ce was weak. However, when Ce walked over from afar and killed someone in 3 seconds, the people around them dared not utter a word of nonsense anymore. On the other side, when Mira saw that Ce who was with Yunjian was so powerful, her arrogant and despotic attitude instantly collapsed. Seeing Yunjian walk towards her step by step, Mira was afraid. However, her years of arrogance made Mira unable to lower her head. She suddenly pointed at Yunjian and shouted at Yunjian, "You! Stop right there. I'm the young mistress of Europe's arms industry. My father's firearms influence covers the entire Europe. If you dare to attack me today, I'll make sure you die miserably." Mira was frightened by Yunjian's aura. Some people were born with a strong aura. Just their aura alone was enough to make people retreat 3 feet in fear. Yunjian was such a person. Yunjian didn't say anything. She continued to walk towards Mira. Her footsteps were very slow. Her feet didn't make any sound when she stepped on the ground. "You." Seeing that Yunjian didn't retreat, Mira was stunned. However, Mira quickly reacted and threatened Yunjian again, "Let me tell you, my father is about to form an alliance with the Kosha mercenaries. If you dare to do anything to me today, all of you will die. I will pull out all of your tendons and peel off all of your skin." Mira's threat caused the surrounding people to cry out in surprise. Europe's arms industry tycoon was about to form an alliance with the Kosha mercenaries? Then, just as everyone was thinking of this, an ice-cold, enchanting female voice that sounded like the sound of nature reached everyone's ears. Chapter 1299. Yunjian's words were extremely high-profile this time. She did not use Kosha mercenaries but my Kosha mercenaries. The former could give people a feeling of yes or no, but the latter was an absolute tone. Her Kosha mercenaries was the only person who had the right to say that. Even the higher-ups of Kosha mercenaries, Elder Snake Lizard and Elder Tiger Leopard, did not have the right. The only person who had the right was the boss of Kosha mercenaries. At the same time, other than those around her, no one had ever seen her face. She was the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, Slaying God, who possessed exquisite assassination skills. Someone once said that if they could meet Slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, one's life would not be in vain. Of course, these were the words of those who had come into contact with this Tao. An ordinary person might not even know about the secret agent ranking and assassin ranking, let alone the rest. It could be said that her father's alliance with Kosha mercenaries was Myra's biggest trump card. However, after she revealed her biggest trump card, Yunjian's reply was all she got. "My Kosha mercenaries? You're the boss of Kosha mercenaries? No, how is that possible?" Myra's expression changed drastically. Myra's face turned extremely pale in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone who was standing around was shocked. This little girl was. She was the boss of Kosha mercenaries? How was that possible? If she was the boss of Kosha mercenaries, then she was the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, slaying God. Slaying God? She was slaying God? Slaying God? You're slaying God? The people around her exclaimed in shock. Yun Jian's words were like a ticking time bomb that exploded in an instant. Slaying God, what kind of existence was she? He was simply a legendary figure. Since slaying God's debut, many international businessmen and politicians had been quietly killed. There was even a saying in the underworld that went like this: those who were targeted by slaying God would feel as if the Grim Reaper had his hands on their necks. None of them had ever imagined that such a person would one day stand in front of them alive. Doya and Charlotte also recovered from the deep despair they felt when they saw Maina's death. The two of them looked at Yun Jian in disbelief after hearing what the crowd said. Slaying God? Doya and Charlotte were stunned. They were completely dumbfounded. Doya and Charlotte would never have dreamed that it was because they were kind enough to save Yun Jian 2 days ago. Even if Yun Jian didn't need it, just this one move was enough to change their fates completely. What's slaying God? Look at how old you are. How dare you claim that the Kosha mercenaries are yours? Do you think others won't say such nonsense? Do you really think that people will believe that you're slaying God just because you spout nonsense? You. A mocking male voice came out of nowhere. He wanted to continue, but just as the words were about to leave his mouth, a small flying dagger was flung from where Yun Jian was to the man who spoke. The flying dagger flew out of Yun Jian's hand and entered the man's mouth the moment he opened it, piercing it. The man's mouth was pierced by the flying dagger and blood splattered everywhere. Although he was not dead, the man fainted from the sudden pain that he did not even have time to react to. Yun Jian spoke to Qin Yu, who had just rushed over and was standing behind her. Qin Yu, kill that blabbermouth. The 2 words Qin Yu made everyone's eyes widen. Chapter 1300. Qin Yu's name was well known in the underworld as well because she was slaying God's follower and she was a master of poison. How skillful was Qin Yu when it came to poisoning? For example, Qin Yu could brush past a person within 3 meters. She did not even have to lift her hand and she could poison the person who brushed past her without anyone noticing. She could make people die without anyone knowing. That was Qin Yu's ability. It was because of this terrifying ability that the people in the underworld feared Qin Yu, second only to slaying God. This was because slaying God had killed her openly, while Qin Yu could kill a person in such a way that the person would not even know why he died. This was the power of poison techniques. Slaying God was the one who made Qin Yu famous. It could be said that other than snake, lizard and tiger, leopard from the Kosha mercenaries, Qin Yu was one of the few who could follow slaying God and even see her face. Moreover, Qin Yu was always by slaying God's side. She would not listen to anyone else other than slaying God. Therefore, when they heard Yun Jian address the girl behind her as Qin Yu, the people around them were shocked. After the shock, it was followed by endless terror and fear. Oh my God! Slaying God is her. It's really her. Someone could not help exclaiming. Just as he exclaimed, however, he covered his mouth in fright, afraid that Yun Jian would hear what he said. Myra's legs were shaking from fear. Mira had never met anyone who was more powerful than her father, so she had always been fearless. Until just now, she was completely terrified. She still remembered her father telling her that she should not offend these 2 people in the underworld. If she did, they would annihilate the entire armaments family. One of them was slaying God, who ranked first on the secret agent leaderboard, while the other was Enhan's leader. However, Mira had always thought that it was impossible for her to meet them. When she heard that Yun Jian was slaying God, she felt like her world had collapsed. At this moment, Yun Jian had already walked up to Mira. She stretched out her hand and grabbed Myra's long hair. The group of bodyguards around Mira, including Myra's man, didn't even dare to let out a fart. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They watched as Yunjian pulled Myra's long hair and pulled Myra's face in front of her. Chi. From afar, Qingyu poured out a bottle of dissolving water and turned the unconscious man into a puddle of blood before everyone's eyes. There was a horrifying sound of dissolving chemicals. Who else in the world could use a bottle of liquid to turn a person into a pool of blood? Qingyu's performance had proven her identity in front of everyone. She was Qingyu, elder Qingyu of the Kosha mercenaries. At the same time, she was also known as the Poison Lady by outsiders. Ah. Yunjian dragged Mira to witness the man's body turning into a puddle of blood after Qingyu poured a bottle of liquid on him. Usually, Mira would not be frightened by such a gory scene, but it was different now. Now that she was being suppressed by Yunjian, the fact that Yunjian was showing her such a gory scene was, "Do you want to have a taste?" Yunjian forced Mira to watch the scene. She was already next to Mira, her lips close to Myra's ears as she whispered something that scared Mira out of her wits. No. No. Although Mira liked to kill, she was completely terrified when it came to the moment where she would be killed. Yunjian did not wait for Mira to finish. Her lips curled into a sinister smirk that was as eerie as the Grim Reaper from hell. She grabbed Myra's back with her right hand and flung her face and chest to the ground. Mira was flung to the ground directly, her nose smashing into the ground. Mira was terrified. Just as she was about to stand up, she felt a strong foot stepping on her back. Then, she was firmly pressed down, not allowing her to get up. Above her back, Yunjian's decisive voice rang, "Shuang, get me a saw. I'll cut off her limbs with my own hands today." His words were extremely calm, but the words he said were enough to frighten people. However, that was not everyone's focus. Shuang, one of the 4 leaders of the Enhan organization. Someone's eyes widened after hearing Yunjian's words. Shuang lowered his head at Yunjian and replied respectfully, "Yes." Oh my God. The 4 leaders of the Enhan organization are here too. Someone's face turned pale with fright. Not long after Shuang left, a few female silhouettes came from afar. When the leaders saw Mira under Yunjian's foot, he sprinted over and could not stop himself from calling out, "Mira?" Oh my God. Yunjian looked up and saw Hina, Maggie, and the rest who she met in the hot spring running over. The one who shouted was the arrogant Hina. When Yunjian entered a hot spring, Hina sent Maggie to chase her away and even wanted to kill her. Now that she saw Hina and Maggie, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Not long after, Hina, Maggie and the rest stood in front of Yunjian. Hina saw Yunjian stepping on Mira, and her expression changed drastically. She did not know what was going on, so when she saw Yunjian's action, she scolded Yunjian directly. Chapter 1301. Hina also became friends with Mira 2 days ago. Although Mira looked down on Hina at the beginning, after seeing that Hina had connections in Kosha mercenaries and an Hun organization, she started to talk to Hina more. Myra's father told her to make more useful friends, and Mira always kept it in mind, so she forced herself to talk to Hina more. This made Hina think that she had successfully become friends with Mira. When she saw Mira being stepped on by Yunjian, Hina wanted to flatter Mira, so she rushed in and threatened Yunjian with Mira and her status. In this world where the strong were respected, strength and status represented everything. Hina also believed that if she said so, Yunjian would definitely be scared and let go of her foot. But what Hina didn't expect was that Yunjian didn't let go of her foot. Instead, after hearing Hina's threat, she stepped harder on Myra's back. Mira was being stepped on by this foot and kept howling. But now she didn't even have the courage to beg for mercy. "Did you hear what I said? Why aren't you letting go of your dirty feet? I've seen a lot of rookies like you who think you're great, but actually just mixed in our circle. If you let go of your foot now, I can still leave you a whole corpse. Otherwise." Hina looked at Yunjian as if she was a senior looking at a new rookie. Hina thought that she had been in this circle for 5 or 6 years. What kind of things had she not seen? People like Hina, she wasn't a professional killer trained by an organization. Usually, professional killers trained by an organization, if they could come out alive from the organization, they must be at the level of a senior killer or an agent. In this world, some people started to come into contact with the circle of killers or agents when they were 15 or 16 years old, almost approaching adulthood, and started to practice their skills. Hina started to train when she was 15 or 16 years old. Think about it, Hina started to train when she was 15 or 16 years old, and she only learned the killer moves. It was different from someone like Yunjian who grew up among the dead and had to kill others in exchange for her survival, a secret agent assassin who grew up in actual combat. It could be compared like this: one was the real deal, and the other was just a cheap pirated version. Hina herself started to train and learn killer moves around Yunjian's age, so she naturally thought that Yunjian was just a rookie. She had probably just started to mingle in this circle, hadn't she? How dare he be so arrogant in front of me? Before Hina finished her words, some lackeys beside her, led by Maggie, had started to echo her words. Exactly. That's right. Our sister Sheena has thousands of ways to make you die miserably. Moreover, Sister Sheena has people in the Enhan organization and Kosha mercenaries. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and beg for mercy. Then, we can give you a good death. Otherwise, we'll kill you. Maggie and the others looked at Yunjian with hatred, as if they couldn't wait to tear Yunjian into pieces. Maggie even thought in her heart that she shouldn't have let Yunjian go just because she owed Doya a favor. Seeing this, Doya and Charlotte clenched their fists tightly. At this moment, a mellow male voice was heard. Before everyone could react, the owner of the mellow male voice was already standing beside Yunjian. Ce looked at Shuang, who just came back with the saw, and stood beside him silently. He said to Shuang in front of everyone with a slight anger. Chapter 1302. Ce couldn't tolerate having sand in his eyes. The reason why Enhan was able to achieve what it had today was due to the strict implementation of Enhan's own rules. Normally, Ce could joke around with the 4 leaders of the Enhan organization, but when it came to critical moments, he wouldn't allow a single mistake to happen. Moreover, the Enhan organization had its own rules. Everyone in the organization wasn't allowed to be related. The meaning of this rule was that anyone who belonged to the Enhan organization wasn't allowed to use the name of the organization to cause trouble. It meant that no outsiders were allowed to use the words "I know someone from the Enhan organization" to swagger around in the circle. It was obvious that the man Hina mentioned was from the Enhan organization, and she was using this to her advantage. This was something Ce couldn't tolerate. The members of Enhan would definitely be protected by the organization. However, if they were to flaunt their prowess on the international stage just because they were slightly related to Enhan, they were basically using Enhan's name to swindle people everywhere. Ce had severely suppressed this a long time ago. This was something he couldn't tolerate. Yes, young master. Shuang was sweating for Lin Wei. Ce rarely spoke with anger. In fact, Shuang knew that the anger in Ce's tone this time was because someone was targeting Yunjian in the name of Enhan Group. That was why Ce was so angry. The only person who could make Ce emotional was Yunjian. If this matter didn't involve Yunjian, even if the Enhan organization was destroyed, Shuang reckoned that Ce's expression wouldn't change at all. Thus, when comparing the Enhan organization to Yunjian, Shuang reckoned that in Ce's heart, even if there were hundreds of billions of Enhan organization, they wouldn't be able to compare to Yunjian. Thinking of this, Shuang deepened his thoughts of going to Yunjian to flatter her. He felt that he needed to plan for Amo Senya to go with him to flatter Yunjian. Thinking of this, Shuang dialed Ling Wei's communicator and ran to the side to talk. He left behind a group of dumbfounded people. The people standing around had been there since Yunjian's identity as slaying god was exposed. They had witnessed the entire process. Hina, Maggie, and the others were all aware of their performance, and they all thought that Hina, Maggie, and the others were doomed. However, no one expected the man standing next to slaying god to order Shuang, one of the 4 leaders of Enhan, in such a tone. And most importantly, Shuang was actually obedient. Then, this meant that, could it be that this young man, he's the leader of an Hun? Someone cried out in astonishment, which struck everyone's hearts in an instant. Everyone's faces turned pale. Hearing what Ce said, the people around them felt the urge to flee as quickly as possible. However, due to fear, they were rooted to the ground like nails. There was a rumor that anyone who met an Hun's leader would be killed by the organization. Even if they managed to escape, they would be hunted down by an Hun. In other words, they would die without a doubt. Hina, Maggie, and the others who were still acting all high and mighty earlier, fell apart in an instant. Especially Hina, who had just boasted that her man was from an Hun. In the end, Yunjian's man was the leader of an Hun who had never shown his face. This couldn't be real, right? A Kosha mercenary's boss and an Hun's leader. They're a perfect match. I'm afraid there's no one else in this world who's more compatible than them. Just as Hina was in disbelief, a voice from the side sent her to the bottom of the valley. The Kosha mercenary's boss? Slaying God? Slaying God, the #1 secret agent in the international ranking? Chapter 1303. Yunjian. It was slaying God. Hina's expression changed drastically at the sudden realization. She was terrified. Had she offended an Hun's leader and the boss of Kosha mercenaries just to please Mira? Just as she was thinking about it, Yunjian's voice was heard. Shuang, have you brought the saw? It's here. Shuang obeyed. He quickly brought the saw in his hand to Yunjian and passed it to her. The saw was used by farmers to chop down trees. It was only a matter of time before it could be used to cut off a person's leg. Of course, if one were to use this saw to cut off a person's leg without anesthetics, it would be a fate worse than death. Yunjian took the saw and placed it gently on Myra's fair-skinned legs under her shorts. She gently slid down, and the sharp saw cut Myra's fair and smooth thigh, causing blood to gush out. No. No. Sob sob. Mira was trembling in fear. However, Yunjian stepped on her back so hard that she could not move at all. Yunjian bent down and patted Myra's face gently in front of everyone. Then, her soft voice came from above Mira. This saw is quite sharp. It's perfect for sawing off your legs and hands. I'll cut off your legs first, then your hands, and then dig out your heart. Let's do it slowly. Don't rush, okay? Yunjian sounded like she was talking to herself, but Mira was scared out of her wits when she heard it. No. I was wrong. I shouldn't have killed that woman. I'll do whatever you want me to. How about? I'll ask my father to stop allying with your Kosha mercenaries as long as you don't kill me. Don't kill me. It was Myra's first time experiencing the fear of death. She could clearly feel Mayina's struggle before she died. However, the main character this time was Mira herself. Before Mira could finish her sentence, Yunjian had already raised the saw and slashed it on Myra's thigh. Ah! Mira almost fainted from the sudden pain. However, Yunjian held Myra's philtrum tightly to prevent her from passing out. At this moment, Mira would rather pass out. Yunjian. Just as Yunjian was about to cut off Myra's leg with the saw, a weak voice was heard. Yunjian turned and saw Doya looking at her with a pale face. Yunjian stopped what she was doing and turned to look at Doya. However, Doya paused. Then, she mustered up her courage and said to Yunjian, she killed Na. I want to avenge Na. I'll kill Mira. Even after knowing Yunjian's identity, Doya could still look at her openly. Although she was slightly fearful, she was braver than most of the men here since she stood out after knowing Yunjian's identity. Yes, we'll kill Mira. Charlotte clenched her fists tightly. Her eyes were red, but she resisted the urge to cry out loud. She looked at Yunjian like Doya. Yunjian narrowed her eyes when she heard the voices. She looked at Doya and Charlotte's enthusiasm. She liked it very much. Chapter 1304. After Yunjian finished speaking, she looked down at Mira, who was under her feet. Mira didn't faint because Yunjian had pinched her philtrum. All Yunjian wanted was for Mira to be in so much pain that she wished she was dead. With a gentle flick of her hand, she swung the saw at Doya and Charlotte without even lifting her head to look at the pair. Doya reached out and caught the saw that Yunjian had tossed over. She grabbed the saw and rushed towards Mira with red eyes. Doya grabbed the saw and rushed to Mira, shouting, "Go to hell." In the next second, Doya grabbed the saw and slashed at Mira's thigh. With a few forceful slashes, one of Mira's thighs was cut off. The leg was completely separated from Mira's body. Mira instantly howled in pain because Yunjian had pinched Mira's philtrum. Mira couldn't resist at all. Her screams pierced through the sky, but no one cared. After Doya chopped off one of Mira's legs, she suddenly remembered that Maina was humiliated to death by Mira. When Maina's chest was cut open, the people around her didn't have any sympathy. The men even whistled as they watched happily. Doya raised the saw and was about to chop off Mira's other leg when Charlotte frantically snatched the saw away. After Mira's arms and legs were chopped off, she couldn't wake up even after pinching her philtrum. She completely fainted. Yunjian stood aside and watched as Doya and Charlotte sawed off Mira's limbs and chopped her into pieces. It was only when Mira breathed her last that Doya and Charlotte stood before Yunjian with their hands clasped. Mira's death could at most avenge Maina, but Maina was dead. Mira's death could not bring Maina back to life. Yunjian lowered her eyes. She didn't turn around. Ce was standing behind Yunjian. He reached out and pulled Yunjian into his embrace, then ordered Shuang, "Kill everyone here." That didn't include Doya and Charlotte. Shuang naturally knew what was going on. "What? You actually want to kill us? Why?" When some people heard Ce's words, their expressions changed drastically, and they all began to turn and flee frantically. With Shui Ying's ability, even if everyone present worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for him. Moreover, anyone who was targeted by the leader of an Hun would definitely die. Encountering such a situation, it was impossible for them not to run. Every one of them ran faster than anyone else. When Qingyu saw this, she helped Shuang to kill all those who were trying to escape. The one thing Hina regretted the most before she died was that she didn't care about anything and rushed to help Mira. But in the end, she got herself killed. She regretted provoking Yunjian. This devil. There were corpses everywhere, but Yunjian and Ce's expressions didn't change at all. To Yunjian and Ce, dead people were something they were used to. This was how it was in this circle. Chapter 1305. Yunjian's eyes flashed with determination. Both Doya and Charlotte were stunned. They did not expect Yunjian to say that. "Are you two willing to join the Kosha mercenaries?" Doya and Charlotte would never dream of such a good thing. They would never dream of Yunjian inviting them to join the Kosha mercenaries just because they had saved the Kosha mercenaries' boss. Doya and Charlotte knew very well that they had to fight for their own success. They had never thought that they would dream of Yunjian repaying them for saving Yunjian. Hence, when they heard Yunjian's words, Doya and Charlotte were stunned. If it were anyone else, they would definitely nod their head and join first before thinking about anything else. However, Doya and Charlotte did not do that. Doya lowered her head and looked at the dust on the ground. She was about to speak when she heard a voice. Just as she was about to say something, Yunjian's voice came again. "Don't worry. I've never invited useless people to join the Kosha mercenaries. I'm inviting you to join the Kosha mercenaries because you have the ability to grow. As for me, I'm just a talent scout." This was what Doya and Charlotte were worried about. They were different from others. They wanted to rely on their own ability to survive in this world. They did not want to rely on their relatives, friends, or lovers to flaunt their prowess everywhere like Mira or Hina. They wanted to become stronger. Just like Yunjian, who did not rely on anyone. All right. I agree. Doya grinned at Yunjian all of a sudden. I agree too. Charlotte clenched her fists. They had to become strong so that they would not be bullied. So that they would not be like before when they could only watch helplessly as Mira killed Maina. Then, I welcome you all to join us. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and smiled, a sharp luster flashing in her eyes. Yunjian only invited Doya and Charlotte to join. As for the others, she did not care. She, Yunjian, did not invite the weak. Other friends like Doya and Charlotte were not qualified to do so. Anyone that Yunjian invited would definitely be a future powerhouse that she recognized. She wouldn't accept trash. The flower bed where Yunjian and the others were at was quite a distance away from the venue of the tea party. At this moment, in the dance hall of the tea party, the snake lizard was already here. She was standing in the middle of the hall with her arms crossed. Many people recognized Snake Lizard's identity and came forward to express their goodwill. However, Snake Lizard did not pay any attention to him. She still maintained her cold and aloof appearance. You, Elder Snake Lizard, greetings. I'm Europe's arms tycoon, Miro. We've met before. Last time, I proposed an alliance with the Kosha mercenaries. It should be about time, right? The man who called himself Miro bowed in front of Snake Lizard and spoke to her respectfully. Miro was Myra's father and was also a Europe's arms tycoon. I forgot. Snake Lizard stood there with her arms crossed. She did not even pay attention to Miro. Hearing that, Miro's face was immediately filled with awkwardness. However, he continued to move forward. However, at this moment, the door suddenly opened. A beautiful teenage girl and a handsome man walked in from outside the door. A handsome man followed behind them. The handsome man held a gunny sack in one hand and threw it in front of everyone. The contents of the gunny sack rolled out. It was a body without limbs. The body was stiff but the face was intact. It was obvious who this person was. Chapter 1306. When he saw that Shuang had thrown the corpse out of the sack, which was so cold that there was no warmth at all, and it was a corpse with 4 broken limbs. Miru had just turned his head to look curiously, but at the same time, he screamed out in horror, "Ah! Daughter? My daughter! Mila!" Mila had always been spoiled by Milu. She was so spoiled that she was afraid she would melt. Milu also felt that all this was natural. So when he knew that Mila had fallen in love with perverted killing methods, Milu did not stop her. Instead, he found a bunch of living people for Mila to play with. Then, he used all kinds of cruel methods to kill those people. Yes, Mila had liked to kill a living person in the most cruel way since she was young. For example, when she killed Maina just now, Mila cut off Maina's chest while she was still alive. But to Mila, watching Maina's chest being cut off while she was still alive was a very fun and interesting thing. And Milu had always indulged his daughter to do this, because he had the ability to indulge his daughter to treat others like this. But when he saw his most precious daughter's limbs being broken and thrown on the ground like trash, he was shocked. And when he heard Yunjian call his daughter, he thought, "Thing? Whose thing is this? Come out and claim it." It was just a simple statement, but Miru's initial calmness had turned into a state where he could not wait to strangle Yunjian to death, cut her into 1,000 pieces, and tear her apart. "Ah! My precious daughter, ah!" Milu screamed and roared. His whole face turned red in front of everyone's eyes. Because of his anger, Milu's whole face turned red. Yunjian looked at Milu's extremely angry face. She narrowed her eyes, and a murderous intent flashed in her eyes. Then, Yunjian hooked her finger at Milu, with a hint of mockery. After Yunjian hooked her finger at Milu, she paused for a while before continuing, "Your daughter killed my friend." Yunjian's initial smirk was gone as she spoke, her expression turning cold all of a sudden. "So she must pay the price," Yunjian said coldly. At this point, she paused again, and Yunjian reached out her hand and pointed at Miru. "The price is... I want your position as Europe's arms tycoon," Yunjian said arrogantly. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. As long as she took away Miro's position as the European arms tycoon, Yunjian would have all of Miro's financial resources and manpower. The European arms tycoon was not an ordinary person or a small position. If Yunjian were to obtain this position, she would definitely double the status of the Kosha mercenaries internationally. Yunjian's words caused an uproar among the crowd. In particular, the top assassins and secret agents from all over the world were all present at the scene. Yunjian, a teenage girl, rushed in and pointed at Miru exaggeratedly, asking him to hand over the position of the European arms tycoon. Was this little girl crazy? Pfft, ha ha ha. Little girl, why didn't you go home to find your mother to drink milk? Why did you come here to sing? Haha. Someone was suddenly amused by Yunjian, and then walked 3 meters away from Yunjian while holding his stomach. The surrounding people were infected by this person's atmosphere, and one by one, they all laughed. However, the man who walked 3 meters away from Yunjian immediately held his stomach and laughed. Yunjian suddenly glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. She reached out her hand, and a blade flew along the track to the man's neck at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. One knife, and the throat was sealed. The man was still laughing, but his laughter suddenly stopped, and in the next second, he fell to the ground with a plop. The people who were laughing and mocking Yunjian for being a little kid all stopped laughing instantly. Suddenly, the surroundings were silent. Chapter 1307. Just a moment ago, Miru was still growling angrily and wanted to rush forward. His delusional action of rushing forward abruptly stopped in the next second. It was because the man who mocked Yunjian just now was killed by the flying dagger Yunjian had thrown just like that. This young lady was definitely not as simple as she looked. Miru's impulsive desire to charge forward and kill Yunjian on the spot was quelled at this moment. Miru was a European arms tycoon after all. The fact that he could climb to this position that countless people were waiting for meant that Miru was not someone who acted on impulse. Even if his daughter was brutally murdered, Miru could only glare viciously at Yunjian from afar because of the power that Yunjian had displayed earlier. Compared to Miru, the surrounding group of people were dumbfounded. The people who mocked Yunjian along with the man who was killed earlier all shut their mouths. The place was silent. The crowd watched as Yunjian walked toward Miru. Ce, who was walking side by side with Yunjian, walked at the same time as well. Shuang, who was behind them, followed as well. Qingyu, Doya and the rest did not come over. Qingyu was still contacting the Kosha mercenaries to deal with the incident earlier. At this moment, someone among the crowd saw Shuang, who was following behind Yunjian and Ce. He's one of the 4 leaders of the Enhun group, Shuang. The crowd was stunned when they heard this. Even Miru's eyelids twitched. Miru clenched his fists. She killed his daughter. He would never let Yunjian go. Just as Miru was thinking this, he suddenly noticed a slender and cold silhouette walking past him. Snake. Lizard twisted her seductive body and walked toward Yunjian under Miru's gaze. Miru's heart skipped a beat. Snake. Lizard's cold face looked at Yunjian, who had an equally cold expression. Miru thought that Snake. Lizard had a grudge against Yunjian. Now that Snake. Lizard was heading towards Yunjian. Could it be, Elder Snake Lizard, as long as you kill her for me and avenge my daughter, I will give you half of my financial resources and power. Miru couldn't wait to tear Yunjian into pieces. Therefore, Miru had put in his capital this time. As long as he could kill Yunjian, who had persecuted his poor daughter, Miru was willing to give up half of his wealth and power. Moreover, Miru knew that the condition he offered was very tempting. He was also certain that Snake Lizard would definitely agree. After all, if the Kosha mercenaries could obtain half of the forces under the European arms tycoon, it would be enough to strengthen their international standing. What's more, killing this teenage girl should be a piece of cake for Snake Lizard, right? Miru's words did not receive any response from Snake Lizard. However, Miru was already confident that Snake Lizard would help him kill Yunjian. Looking at Snake Lizard walking towards Yunjian while Yunjian was frowning slightly, Miru was even more determined in his thoughts. In order to make Snake Lizard quickly kill Yunjian for him, Miru even shouted at Snake Lizard, quick! Kill her quickly! Kill her! Kill her and I will give you half of my financial resources and power. Miru's face turned red, it was the kind of red that came from anger. However, just as Miru finished speaking, Yunjian's voice rang out, I am only worth half of your arms and power? Then wouldn't it be more worth it for me to kill you and take all your forces? Yunjian's words made everyone present confused. What nonsense was this little girl talking about? Just as they were thinking about it, Snake Lizard had already walked in front of Yunjian. However, before Snake Lizard could speak, a man's figure suddenly walked in through the gate. The man glanced around and locked onto Yunjian. The man walked over and shouted at Yunjian, SS. So you are here. Sister Snake Lizard has been looking for you for a long time. The man was Mad Dragon. Chapter 1308. As soon as Mad Dragon and Snake Lizard said that, everyone around them looked at Yunjian in fear. Everyone stared at her. SS. If Yunjian's acquaintances did not know what SS meant, everyone here knew what it meant. In the underworld, there was no one else who could be called SS other than Slaying God. Moreover, Snake Lizard called Yunjian her sister. That man is Mad Dragon from an Hun group. Mad Dragon only joined the Kosha mercenaries recently. That means this young lady is Slaying God. In her past life, Yunjian would attend such events as well, but every time she appeared, there would be an uproar from the crowd. Of course, other than the uproar from the small fries around them, the big shots around them narrowed their eyes and looked at Yunjian provocatively. Miru's ability was not to be underestimated, but in an event like this, his status was at the bottom. Therefore, when he heard that Yunjian was Slaying God, he recalled how he had asked Snake Lizard to kill Yunjian. Miru felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he stood rooted to the ground. Looking at the bewildered looks and squinting eyes of the people around her, Yunjian was unfazed. She merely frowned. In the past, Yunjian would use a human skin mask and an incredible disguise skill to turn herself into another person when she attended various events. Everyone in the underworld knew that, so even if they saw Yunjian's face, no one would look for Slaying God based on Yunjian's appearance. As time passed, no one would do such a stupid thing. Yunjian knew that if she showed her real face today, everyone would think that she was wearing a human skin mask, and no one would be willing to investigate her face. Even if someone were to investigate, she had a way to kill them before they could track her down. In the past, the Kosha mercenaries did not have the ability to do that, but now, she had the ability to do it. Therefore, she did not have to disguise herself as another person anymore. Outsiders thought that she was very mysterious in her past life, but in reality, Yunjian did not want to expose herself because she was afraid that she would not be able to protect herself after her identity was exposed. After all, the number one position on the special agent ranking list was occupied by many powerful international figures. There were also countless people who were eyeing this position covetously. At the same time, Yunjian had already reached her hand out to Miru. She took 2 steps toward Miru, her expression unchanged as she said, "Hand over your European firearms force obediently, and I'll leave your corpse intact." Yunjian was never one to let her emotions get the better of her. To be honest, Yunjian did not look for Milu today just for Maina. Maena's death was just an excuse. What Yun Jian wanted was Miru's European firearms force. Shuang, who was standing behind Ce, immediately knew that Ce did not intend to expose her identity when Ce glanced at him. However, compared to protecting Yun Jian, his young master was willing to do anything. Shuang gulped, cleared his throat gently, and turned to look at the crowd. The Enhan organization has reached an agreement with the Kosha mercenaries. From now on, the Kosha mercenaries' business is the Enhan organization's business. Anyone who disobeys will become the Enhan organization's enemy. Shui Ying's words caused a commotion among the crowd. The strength of the Enhan organization was well known to everyone. Such a powerful organization, their armed forces could even be compared to a developed country. Fortunately, the Enhan organization had never intervened in any conflicts and had always remained neutral. However, today, they had made an exception for the boss of the Kosha mercenaries, slaying God. Chapter 1309. If the people present knew that this was Enhan's leader's way of expressing his love for Kosha mercenaries' boss, slaying God, they would have been dumbfounded. Just now, Miru still had a trace of a fluke heart, but at this moment, it was completely crushed. Kosha mercenaries and Enhan had joined forces. Even the internationally renowned Inferno Ring was annihilated just like that, let alone a small European arms tycoon like him. It's over, it's over. My life's work. It's over just like that. Miru understood his situation very well. He reached out his hands and howled at the sky like a madman. Then, Miru sat on the ground, completely paralyzed. He was done for. The European arms tycoon would have a successor, but he had offended slaying God, the boss of Kosha mercenaries. Did he still have a chance to live? The people around were affected by Miru's howls and their faces turned pale with shock. Lizard, I'll leave him to you, Yun Jian said to Snake. Lizard after squinting at Miru. All right. Snake. Lizard nodded. Miru would not be able to escape death. It was Yun Jian's principle to eliminate the source of trouble. She would not give Miru a chance to make a comeback. Yun Jian had handed over some of the organization's matters to Snake. Lizard and Tiger. Leopard. Although she was a hands-off boss, she was still the one who handled most of the important matters personally. Yun Jian was dragged away by Ce before the third global underground tea party ended. The tea party started early in the morning and lasted until midnight. However, Yun Jian was dragged out by Ce halfway through the tea party. Everyone present noticed this, but no one dared to speak carelessly. That was slaying God. Ce did not care about Enhan's matters at all. He was even more thorough than Yun Jian in being a hands-off boss. Ce did not say a word throughout the whole process. It was Shuang who did what he wanted. In fact, if Yun Jian didn't attend this year's tea party, Ce definitely wouldn't have come. Of course, if Yun Jian came to participate, then everything would be different. Qing Yu had just finished dealing with what had happened and walked into the ball. Seeing a mad dragon standing beside Snake. Lizard, Qing Yu blinked and went over, turning to ask Snake. Lizard, Master, where's Sister Jian? Snake. Lizard turned around and was about to speak when Shuang, who was not far away, snatched the right to speak. Since there was no one around Shuang, he told Qing Yu generously, the young master has brought the young mistress out for a while. Qing Yu did not pursue the matter further. Country B was surrounded by deserts. Even the lush green lawns were scarce and water was scarce. However, the location of the tea party was chosen in the most prosperous area of Country B, although the most prosperous area here was probably only the poorest area of Country Z. But generally speaking, the places with water sources were the most prosperous places for a country to develop. There was a stream nearby that was very long. There were even fishermen fishing on the stream. The stream was quite wide as well, so it was just right for a boat. Ce held Yun Jian's hand all the way to the stream and saw a fisherman couple anchored their fishing boat by the shore. No matter how poor the locals were, they were not greedy. Ce did not want to disturb the order of this place either. Therefore, Ce pulled Yun Jian over and spoke to the fisherman standing by the shore in the fluent local dialect with a smirk. Yun Jian knew Country B's language. However, Country B was like Country Z. Every region had its own dialect. Ce spoke to the fisherman couple in the local dialect, so Yun Jian did not understand. Chapter 13:10. The fisherman's wife's words stunned Yun Jian for a moment. He said that they were husband and wife. Yun Jian was stunned. At the same time, she turned to look at Ce. Ce was very tall, and Yun Jian wasn't short, but she wasn't tall either. Standing beside Ce, Yun Jian felt like a little bird that was dependent on him. When Yun Jian raised her head, she could just see Ce's smooth chin. His handsome features warmed Yun Jian's heart. The fisherman's wife, who was this woman, covered her mouth when she saw this, and her smile became even more obvious. The woman smiled and reached out to pull Yun Jian onto the boat in a very hospitable manner. At the same time, she said to Yun Jian, "Newlyweds, the two of you are really compatible. This young man is so handsome and dotes on you a lot. Young lady, you're really lucky." As she spoke, the woman had already pulled Yun Jian onto the boat. She even reached out to pat the back of Yun Jian's clean hand. Then, she said to Yun Jian, "Sigh, to think that my husband didn't treat me so well in the past. If he treated me so well, I wouldn't be able to wait to empty out everything I have for him." The woman was joking with Yun Jian. However, after hearing the woman praise Ce, Yun Jian was stunned again. She turned to look at Ce, her eyes filled with great confusion. What exactly did he say to make the fisherman's wife praise him like this? Seeing that Yun Jian had turned to look at him, Ce smiled at Yun Jian. It was the kind of smile that came from the bottom of his heart. After laughing, Ce glanced at the fisherman and his wife, who were looking at him suspiciously from the corner of his eyes. Ce curled his lips and said to the fisherman and his wife in a dialect that Yun Jian couldn't understand, "She can't leave me. She gets shy when she's 1 meter away from me." When the fisherman and his wife heard this, they said, "Oh," in a delaying tone. Then, the fisherman's wife reached out to pat the back of Yun Jian's hand and said to Yun Jian in Country B's language that Yun Jian could understand, "Don't be afraid. Auntie and uncle aren't bad people." With that, the fisherman's wife praised Ce a few more times. Yun Jian was baffled by what she heard. She really wanted to know what Ce had said to the fisherman and his wife. However, in front of the fisherman and his wife, the fisherman's wife, S paddles paddles as paddle, S and or knots paddle S paddles. Whenever Ce said a few words, the fisherman's wife would turn to Yun Jian and praise Ce. Yun Jian didn't really understand. Instead, she turned to glare at Ce with a pout, but what she got in return was Ce's innocent handsome face. This was the first time that Yun Jian had suffered a setback. She had never been fooled like today because she didn't understand the local dialect. There were many local dialects in the world. If all of them were added together, it would be impossible to count them all. Yun Jian couldn't possibly learn all the dialects in the world in just over a decade. However, she didn't expect Ce to know this town's dialect. Just as she was thinking this, the boat suddenly swayed. Then, Ce, who was sitting beside Yun Jian, accidentally fell onto Yun Jian. He suddenly fell onto Yun Jian's body and pressed Yun Jian against the paddle. This time, the fisherman and his wife quickly averted their eyes. After Ce accidentally pressed Yun Jian against the paddle and was pushed up by Yun Jian, the fisherman's wife chuckled and said in a language that Yun Jian from Country B could understand, Chapter 13:11. The fisherman's wife's words caused Yun Jian's face to turn bright red. Ce didn't reply, but she enjoyed this feeling very much. When the fisherman's wife saw that Yun Jian was shy, she walked over and pulled Yun Jian to the other side of the boat. At the stern of the boat, which was 3 meters away from Ce and the fisherman, she pulled Yun Jian's hand and whispered to Yun Jian, "Little girl, don't be shy. Little girl, don't be shy, and don't think that Auntie is long-winded. You don't know, but the man that Auntie teaches is the only one in our town who doesn't cheat. Auntie sees that we hit it off, so Auntie will teach you how to discipline men." As she spoke, the fisherman's wife looked over at Ce, who was sitting at the bow of the boat, and the fisherman's figure, who was paddling. When she saw that Ce and the fisherman weren't looking over, the fisherman's wife began to teach Yunjian her sure-kill technique. The fisherman's wife moved her head closer to Yunjian's ear, and Yunjian didn't resist. Then, the fisherman's wife's words slowly drifted out. "Auntie is telling you, women, you can do whatever you want, but once you're in bed, you have to serve your man with all your might. Don't be shy." Yunjian was listening to everything the fisherman's wife said, but once she thought of herself and Ce after she finished listening to them, Yunjian's face couldn't help but turn red, and her heart thumped wildly. When the fisherman's wife pulled Yunjian back to the bow of the boat, where Ce and the fisherman were, and personally handed Yunjian's hand to Ce, the fisherman's wife looked at Yunjian with a "you and I know" look. She just wanted Yunjian and Ce to have fun in bed. When she thought of this, Yunjian lowered her head, and her face turned even redder. "What did you guys talk about?" To make matters worse, Ce was going to whisper in Yunjian's ear. "Nothing." Ce went to Yunjian's ear. Yunjian was numbed by the airflow from Ce's words, and she gently pushed Ce. "Xiao Jian, you've become naughty." Ce smirked as he stared at her. His stare made Yunjian even more bashful. At this time, the boat went into a cave, and the fisherman and his wife stood in front of the boat, rowing. Both of them were very careful when they passed through the cave. After all, if they made a mistake, it was very likely that they would capsize in the cave. After all, there were a lot of sizes, and they were very united. People's rescue was the fisherman's life. However, if the boat capsized in the cave, the vagrants would not be able to see it at all, even if they screamed for help. Therefore, the fisherman and his wife were rowing the boat seriously with their backs facing Yunjian and Ce. The moment they passed the cave, Ce suddenly bent down and pressed Yunjian's head with one hand while he pulled Yunjian's head closer to him with the other. However, he bent down and kissed her little mouth that didn't have time to react. It was an exciting action since the fisherman and his wife were standing not too far away. It was not like there was no light in the cave. If the fisherman's wife saw her and Ce doing it right in front of them, would it not prove that she and Ce were burning with desire and thirst? Yunjian pushed Ce a few times, but Ce stayed where he was and kissed her on the lips. It was only when they were about to leave the cave and the fisherman's wife turned around that Yunjian pushed Ce away. However, because she pushed a little too hard and both of them were inexperienced, their lips were pushed away in time when they pushed Ce away, making a muffled sound. The sound made Yunjian straighten her back. Chapter 13:12. The fisherman's wife's question made Yunjian, who had straightened her back, shake her head and answer, "I didn't hear you." Yunjian was the most obedient now. Ce's heart itched at the sight. He felt like he should hold Xiao Jian in his arms and not let anyone see her beauty. Because her beauty was his. It could only be his. It's probably the fishes in the stream kissing in heat. There's a lot of fishes in this stream. It's summer now and the fishes are all out. They're in heat now. The fisherman explained with a laugh. Then, he rowed the oar again. There was no end to the stream, but the spot where the fisherman and his wife usually rowed and fished was already at the end. Since the fisherman and his wife did not know if there would be other dangers over there, they did not plan to continue rowing. You too have to live a good life. When they bid farewell to Yunjian and Ce, the fisherman and his wife leaned against each other affectionately as they watched Yunjian and Ce and waved at them. The fisherman's wife said in a friendly manner. The fisherman and his wife were adamant that they did not want a single cent from Yunjian and Ce. They even said that they were bringing Yunjian and Ce along the way. Yunjian and Ce thanked the fisherman and his wife. When they were about to leave, the fisherman's wife even asked them to stay with a grin. "You two really don't need to stay at my place for a night?" My house's soundproofing is really the best within a 10-mile radius. The fisherman's wife's words made Yun Jian blush again. Ce turned down the offer without hesitation. It was only then that Yun Jian and Ce headed back. Since Yun Jian and Ce had come out in the afternoon, it took them almost the entire afternoon to travel from upstream to downstream. When they returned to the ball, it was already time for dinner. However, Yun Jian and Ce did not plan to have dinner here. They planned to return to Country Z's Longmen City directly. Ce had sent a helicopter to return to Country Z with Yun Jian. Snow Eagle, Snake, Lizard, and Mad Dragon had to stay and return the next day after the ball ended. Before they left, Yun Jian met Doya and Charlotte. Doya and Charlotte had simply covered Maina's body with a white cloth and tried their best to piece her together. The parts that were damaged by Mira could never be recovered. When Yun Jian went to meet Doya and Charlotte, both of them were kneeling in front of the white cloth that covered Maina's body without uttering a word. Yun Jian went over and gently placed her hands on Doya and Charlotte's shoulders. After 2 seconds of silence, she said, "Only when you become stronger can you protect the people you want to protect." Hearing Yun Jian's voice, Doya turned to look at her. Doya could hear the slight sadness in her voice. Doya asked in return, "You're so strong. Will there be times when you can't protect the people you want to protect?" Hearing Doya's question, Yun Jian suddenly clenched her fists. The death of the little girl and her younger brother in her past life was still vivid in her mind. Yun Jian released her fists quickly without any change in her expression. Silence, dead silence. Just when Doya thought that Yun Jian would not speak, she suddenly heard her reply solemnly, "Yes." She was strong, but she was not God. She was not omnipotent. Even she, slaying God, would make mistakes. "I heard that you're going to Country M first before reporting to the mercenary group." Yun Jian broke the silence. This time, it was Charlotte who spoke. Her eyes were dull and her lips were pale as if she was reminiscing about the past. Country M is Na's hometown. She was abducted by an assassin organization when she was 15. We met in the organization. She told me a long time ago that she had family, but she didn't want to drag them down with her identity as an assassin. She once said that if she couldn't wait until she became strong enough to go home and die before she could, she asked me to bring her back to her hometown. Chapter 13:13. If Yun Jian lowered her head to look at Charlotte, she could see the glint of clarity in the girl's eyes that glinted in determination. Charlotte forced herself to sound normal, but her hoarse voice betrayed her emotions. She clenched her fists tightly as she stared at Maina's body that was covered by the white cloth. Suddenly, a teardrop silently flowed down from the corner of Charlotte's eye, sinking into the dust. She shed tears because of Maina's death and for herself who was still living in such a cruel world. "Yun Jian, I'll definitely become a powerhouse. I'm grateful that you've avenged Maina and given Doya and I the chance to join the Kosha mercenaries." Charlotte wiped her tears away and stood up. She turned around and looked straight at Yun Jian. "You don't have to thank me. You should be thanking yourself." Yun Jian gave Charlotte a nonchalant smile before she turned and walked out. She did not help Doya and Charlotte for no reason. Doya and Charlotte were good seedlings. She allowed them to join the Kosha mercenaries to nurture them so that they could be used by the Kosha mercenaries in the future. She was not a saint. Of course, if Doya and Charlotte betrayed the Kosha mercenaries one day, she promised that she would kill them personally. Not all of the international bigwigs were present at this underground tea party, but it was undeniable that many bigwigs were present. Yun Jian and Ce did not join the party and left the rest to Snake, Lizard, Qingyu, and Shuaying. Ce sent a helicopter to bring Yun Jian back to Country Z overnight. It took some time to return to Country Z. Other than the pilot, there were only Yun Jian and Ce in the helicopter. At this moment, the pilot of the helicopter was like a blind and deaf person. He didn't dare and wouldn't turn his head to look behind him. Of course, this fueled a certain someone's ambition. Ce sat beside Yun Jian, his body pressed tightly against Yunjian's side, enjoying the girl's soft and beautiful touch. When Ce leaned over, Yunjian's cheeks flushed. When Ce's large palm covered her small hand, Yunjian stepped back slightly since the pilot was still sitting in front of them. Yunjian's shyness tickled Ce's heart. Ce grabbed Yunjian's hand and pulled her into his embrace. Xiao Jian. Ce's low, magnetic voice rang. Yunjian was pulled into Ce's embrace. Feeling Ce's firm chest, she thought it was his fresh scent. Since there were other people around, she pushed Ce. Don't. There's someone here. Yunjian's voice was even more misleading. Just as she said that, Ce pressed Yunjian's head down and kissed her on the lips. No one saw the murderous glint that flashed across the pilot's eyes in the pilot's seat. In the next second, just as Ce kissed Yunjian, the pilot flipped his hand and a machete appeared in his hand. Chapter 13-14. The pilot's actions were so sudden that there was no time to react. However, Ce, who had just kissed Yunjian, suddenly reacted. He immediately moved away from Yunjian's tender lips and kicked the pilot viciously towards the left side of the helicopter door. Yunjian had already reacted. She followed closely behind Ce and pulled open the helicopter door at the same time. The pilot who had tried to assassinate Yunjian and Ce had never expected that Yunjian and Ce would still be so vigilant despite being so lovey-dovey. Yunjian pulled open the helicopter door at the same time. The pilot was kicked out of the helicopter by Ce. Then, the pilot fell from a few thousand meters in the air like a kite with a broken string. Yunjian could only hear a blood-curdling scream before it disappeared into the clouds. No one had expected the pilot to suddenly assassinate her and Ce. However, Yunjian and Ce weren't surprised. They were already used to such a life. However, what shocked Yunjian was that she hadn't discussed this with Ce beforehand. The two of them had actually worked together to kick the pilot out of the helicopter door. Just as he was thinking about this, a series of rapid beeping sounds suddenly rang out. Yunjian's eyes darkened and her expression changed slightly. Ce's tall figure was already in the pilot's seat. His slender fingers were typing a series of English buttons on the helicopter's controls. Ce's expression darkened slightly. This helicopter has been injected with the latest bomb. In 2 minutes and 49 seconds, it will ignite the engine and explode on the spot. Since the pilot had dared to assassinate Yunjian and Ce in the helicopter, he must have been prepared to die. There were many puppet assassins in this world. These puppet assassins were trained by certain organizations or important figures. These puppet assassins had been thoroughly brainwashed. At the same time, their greatest characteristic was that they were willing to sacrifice their own lives in order to kill their targets. This was because they had been implanted with the belief that sacrifice was glorious. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to understand this. However, these puppet assassins only obeyed their master's orders. The pilot had most likely listened to someone's orders and was determined to die together with Ce and Yunjian. Yunjian skillfully searched the helicopter for a parachute but didn't find anything. There are no parachutes here, Yunjian said. However, she wasn't surprised. Since someone wanted her and Ce dead, they definitely wouldn't have prepared a parachute for them. This helicopter had been sent directly by Enhan's organization by Ce. This also meant one thing. Enhan was a traitor. But this wasn't the time to talk about it. I'll force the helicopter to the lowest point and prepare to jump off, Ce said as he skillfully controlled the helicopter to descend. Ce and Yunjian both knew how to pilot a helicopter. For people like them, piloting a helicopter was just a basic lesson. Okay, Yunjian nodded after hearing Ce's words. At this moment, the helicopter's door opened. Yunjian stood in front of the door and grabbed the handle. In just a short while, Ce had forced the helicopter to descend from a few thousand meters to a few hundred meters above the ground. There's a lake over there. We'll jump on the count of 3. Ce changed the direction of the helicopter to a lake. Then, He stood behind Yunjian and wrapped his arms around her waist. At this moment, there were still 10 seconds before the bomb exploded. This was the fastest speed possible. They had to control the helicopter and jump from a few thousand meters above the ground in less than 3 minutes. If it was someone else, they would have been at a loss. Chapter 13:15. 3. CE started counting. Just as CE counted to 3, he suddenly changed his tone and changed the number from 3 to 1. As he spoke, CE hugged Yunjian's slender waist from behind and jumped down from the helicopter with Yunjian in his arms. At this moment, they were less than 10 meters away from the surface of the lake. The bomb on the helicopter was about to explode. If Yunjian and CE didn't jump down by now, the helicopter would explode. When a helicopter exploded, there would be a strong momentum. If one was not dozens of meters away from the helicopter, it was very likely that one would be directly blown to death by the momentum of the helicopter explosion. Even if they were tens of meters away, it wasn't guaranteed that they would be safe. Therefore, they had to jump down before the bomb exploded. Otherwise, the probability of death was as high as 99.9%. The moment CE hugged Yunjian and jumped down from the helicopter, Yunjian felt that his sturdy back was shielding her from any danger. CE purposely stood with his back facing Yunjian and jumped down from the helicopter. Just a few seconds after they jumped down, the helicopter behind them that was smashing towards the center of the lake exploded. There was also a deafening boom sound, which scared the surrounding residents into thinking that it was an earthquake. One by one, they ran out of their homes. CE groaned. He hugged Yunjian's body tightly and jumped into the water with Yunjian. CE's front was tightly pressed against Yunjian's back. After they fell into the water, he grabbed Yunjian's small hand and swam towards the lakeside with Yunjian. The loud explosion just now had attracted a lot of attention from the surrounding residents. Now, the lakeside was filled with foreigners to Yunjian and CE. However, no one was willing to help at this moment. After all, the locals naturally didn't dare to help these two people who came out of nowhere and caused such a huge commotion. At this moment, CE had already pulled Yunjian to the shore as fast as she could. The people standing around were a little scared and didn't dare to step forward. This was just a village, and it was 7 or 8 o'clock at night. There were no street lights around. The surrounding people were using torches to illuminate the area. It was clear that this place was not far from Country B, but Yunjian and CE did not know where it was. However, it was clear that this place was not particularly rich at first glance. Moreover, the lighting here was still primitive torches. After CE and Yunjian came ashore, Yunjian finally saw CE clearly. He was still wearing the white short-sleeved shirt that Yunjian had bought for him, but at this moment, the back of the white short-sleeved shirt was already soaked in blood. Yunjian suddenly realized that when CE jumped out of the helicopter just now, his back was facing the helicopter. He used his body to hug her tightly and protect her at the same time. He didn't let her get hit by the debris and the strong impact of the explosion. However, the price he paid was that his back was bleeding profusely. She could imagine how painful it was just by looking at it. However, CE didn't even cry out in pain. He just hugged Yunjian. In fact, if CE hadn't protected her, she wouldn't have gotten hurt at all. Yunjian would have at most suffered some minor injuries from flying out of the helicopter and some scrapes from the debris. However, CE's actions just now had prevented her from getting hurt at all. He would rather get hurt himself than let her get hurt in the slightest. Yunjian didn't know what to say at this moment. She looked at CE's handsome face, which didn't even frown. Yunjian wasn't good at expressing her feelings, but at this moment, she was so touched that she would agree to anything he wanted her to do without hesitation. Chapter 13:16. Now was not the time to talk about this. Yunjian stood up and looked around before asking in fluent English, "What's the matter? Does anyone have a knife, hot water, or a towel?" Lend it to me and I'll thank you handsomely in the future. The most important thing now was to deal with the injury on Ce back. Ce did not treat the injury on his back as an injury at all. Despite the stinging pain, Ce acted like he was not injured at all. Instead, he stood up and pulled Yunjian to check her up and down. He was relieved when he saw that Yunjian was unharmed. As for the injury on his back, it was nothing. Yunjian asked in English because she did not know where they were. English was the world's common language. No matter how poor this place was, there should be someone who knew English. In spite of it, Yunjian was right. There was someone who knew English here. Just as Yunjian finished her question, a young girl around the age of 12 or 13 came out and told Yunjian in the same English as she looked at Yunjian, "Jijia, I have one at home. Let's go to my house." The girl was pretty with big eyes and a small nose, but she was dressed in rags. Thanks." Yunjian nodded and followed the girl to her house with Ce. Yunjian used a knife to remove all the shrapnel from Ce's back and treated all his wounds. The strands of hair that flew out from the explosion of the helicopter were so strong that they sank into Ce's back. The wound was deep as well. If an ordinary person were to suffer such a severe injury, they would have died long ago. When Yunjian treated Ce's wounds, he kept his head turned to look at her. Even when the pain was unbearable, he did not cry out. When Yunjian used the crude equipment as surgical tools for the operation, Ce suddenly told Yunjian, "Xiao Jian, let's get married." Yunjian was stunned. Then she said, "We're not at the age of marriage yet." Moreover, hadn't they already signed a marriage contract in the Yulong continent? Yunjian's cheeks flushed slightly. "Let's go abroad to get a marriage certificate. Country R will be enough." Ce listed a bunch of countries where girls could get married at the age of 16. In the end, Ce said, "When we're of age, we'll go back to country Z to get a marriage certificate." He couldn't wait to pluck her beauty. Yunjian lowered her head, but she was actually avoiding Ce's gaze out of shyness. After a while, Yunjian said softly, "Okay. As long as you get better soon, we'll get married." Yunjian agreed. He was already so hurt because of her. She thought about what Ce had done for her. Yunjian felt that she would give Ce anything she wanted. Although the tools were temporary and could not even be considered surgical tools, the operation was a success. Just as Yunjian came out of the straw hut, the little girl who had lent her the tools came up to her. "Jijia, brother should be all right, right?" the girl asked obediently. "He's fine," Yunjian said and thanked her. Yunjian saw that the straw hut was filled with people. No doubt, they were all here to watch the show. When she came back just now, Yunjian asked the girl where they were. Yunjian also found out that they were in Country B, but they were about to leave the country. It was the border between Country B and another country. Just as the girl finished her question, a careless and ugly woman came out from the side. Glaring at the girl fiercely, she walked over and grabbed the girl's ear, scolding her in Country B's language that Yunjian could understand. "You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."